That's why we've partnered with many local nonprofit organizations and events. And our tradition of giving this community a fair and honest offer continues. Right now, you can save over $6,000 on select new Chevy Silverado 1500s. We're Pucklet Chevrolet GMC in Valley City. Tradition, values, and family ties.
See dealer for details.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Hallstrom, Tom Tucker here with you from the WDAY and Flag Radio studios this morning. Good to have you with us as we continue what has been a week of coverage and will continue to be much more here on our radio and online properties. Good to be with you this morning. Our community continues to grieve, but our community continues to heal. The process has been slow, but it has been sure. And the information and the clarity and the understanding certainly helps us in that process. It was just 1 week ago today in an episode that happened right around 3 p.m. that Mohammed Barakat, whom we still don't know much about, armed himself with homemade grenades, gasoline, explosives, semi-automatic rifles, handguns, and many other tactical weapons and devices, opened fire on 3 officers, which would turn out to be 4. 1 is dead. 2 are still in critical but stable condition, which is the latest update we've heard. We may get more information today about that. And now we all try to figure out exactly what happened and why. Tom, it's been a week. I guess it's been about exactly a week, close to that, since this horrific and tragic event happened. And what I came away from the first press conference, which was a couple of days ago, thinking is, my gosh, it could have been so much worse.
Yes, good morning, Steve. It is good to be with you, and it's tragic, and it's sad, and it's infuriating that we have to cover and talk about an event such as what we saw last Friday. And in talking with some of our colleagues and people out on the streets, we can come up with all kinds of adjectives, tragedy, senseless, horrific. But it seems like, these adjectives alone can't convey and accurately describe what has happened to our community, what has happened to these police officers. And it just seems like these words come up short in trying to make sense of what has happened. And in talking with a number of people as well, over this past week, we are hearing so much from our community, so much feedback, and a couple comments really stand out for me. One is that we as a community have lost our innocence and that we are not a small community anymore.
Yes. Yeah, we've heard that a few times along the way, and you hear that here and there when you see the statistics come out about property crimes are up or drug traffic is up. But incidents like the one that happened last Friday are extremely unsettling. And we all try to come to grips with what our community is and what it's become, and maybe where we are going. The reason we are here today is that the North Dakota BCI and the FBI are going to release more details today in a news conference that's expected at the bottom of the hour. North Dakota Attorney General Drew Wrigley has accused Barakat of engaging in what's being called a savage attack, and only the actions of one heroic officer, Zachary Robinson, have stopped what they are saying would have been a larger and more deadly event. And so at the bottom of the hour, we're expecting to join that press conference, and we'll bring you that here live on the Flag and WDAY. We're expecting to hear from Drew Wrigley, and then there will be several other people in attendance. Chief Deputy Attorney General Claire Ness, BCI Special Agent Casey Miller, Fargo Police Chief David Zibolski, and other law enforcement officers and first responders are expected to be in attendance. We also expect to see Fargo Mayor Tim Mahoney. Potentially, I've heard rumors that Doug Burgum may attend or have some representatives there as well. So we will see what happens at the bottom of the hour. Bonnie Amistadi, a local news veteran, has been covering this with us. It was Bonnie and Tom that were the first people from our organization on site when things started happening last Friday afternoon. Bonnie, it's been a week, and a lot of questions have been answered. Certainly the answers that we got are not ones that make you feel a lot better about the situation. That one picture of all of the weapons and all of the ammunition was extremely unsettling. And I think we all are just left saying, Thank God for Zachary Robinson. Thank God that it didn't get worse than that. Thank God he didn't make it to downtown, which is what Drew Wrigley supposes would have happened. I just wonder your thoughts as you've kind of processed all the information that's come out over the last week.
Yeah, pretty much with you right there. Amen. And thank God for Zach Robinson. He definitely is a hero. He was the officer who ended up taking out suspect Mohammed Barakat. And it's been a week, and we learned some shocking news. The weapons cache, all the ammunition, all the stuff that Drew Wrigley told us about, the Attorney General told us about at the press conference on Wednesday. I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of people. Of course, as news media, we've been working back channels. We had heard some of the stuff, and of course we weren't 100% sure, so we didn't put it on the airways. But I'm curious to see what more comes out today. I'm sure we're going to be getting some more details here at our press conference. We haven't learned much yet about what they found in his apartment. Might we hear about more weapons, more ammunition? Did he have a plan? Did he have writings? Did he have stuff in the computer? I'm sure this is some of the answers we're going to be hearing here. And while not directly coming out and saying that Barakat was headed to the street fair, just that Attorney General Drew Wrigley had said, the downtown area is just about 4 minutes from here. Well, we all knew the street fair was on, and if you kind of connect the dots, so hopefully they're going to come out and tell us exactly what they know about what his intentions were. Now, I am at Fargo City Hall here. Most reporters are gathered in the room. I see the city public information team has just arrived, and then standing in the hallway, a lot of people that I don't recognize with black bands around their badges. And they're federal agents. I can see U.S. Fugitive Task Force. There's a couple of guys in their gear standing around, but the other ones, my guess is FBI, maybe some BCI mixed in there as well. But gearing up for, I'm guessing, some pretty additional riveting information we're going to be learning here at this press conference at 10:30, Steve.
Yeah, we're hearing, Bonnie, that there are going to be some very interesting details provided today. And if this press conference measures up in that regard to the one we had the other day, Tom, we're in for another hold on to your hat kind of an event, because what we heard the other day I think was stunning to everybody. I listened to Attorney General Drew Wrigley speak with the kind of passion and the kind of emotion and just the honesty that he was able to share that day, along with seeing the visuals of what he had in his car. And I was shaking my head almost in disbelief the entire time. If we get anything like that today, then we've got a lot more to talk about.
I think you're right, Steve. It was just such a compelling press conference, so much compelling, provocative, disturbing details that we heard from Attorney General Wrigley. And one thing that he made very clear, and that, of course, was that Officer Zachary Robinson was clearly justified in doing what he did. And Wrigley said, quote, in the wake of Mohammed Barakat's murderous, unprovoked attack, Officer Zach Robinson's use of deadly force was reasonable, it was necessary, it was justified, and in all ways, it was lawful. And the Attorney General further described this attack as a murderous barrage of fire, and it certainly was.
And one of the shots from Zachary Robinson disabled the weapon. It sounds like something out of a Western movie, shoot the gun out of the guy's hand. And nobody in law enforcement that I've talked to believes that was an intentional target. It was, you're trying to aim and shoot at the suspect, and it happened to hit the gun. But fortunate that it did, because there were 20 rounds of unfired ammunition in that semi-automatic.
Yep.
That certainly could have taken a lot more loss of life there. So
yeah, and that shot,
amazing.
That shot was taken from 75 feet
75 feet away.
And he was going up against a suspect with a long rifle and a scope.
Exactly right. Yeah, and Bonnie, that's one thing that I come away thinking about too, is how Officer Robinson kept his composure. You knew his heart was pounding. You knew he'd been trained well, 6 years on the job, and was a trainer himself. But to be able to handle himself, and we heard a conversation that he was talking to himself to kind of help talk his way through the situation, relying on that training. That's the amazing part to me, that this was literally 10 against 1. This was a David and Goliath matchup when it came to artillery.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He was definitely focused on the job he needed to do. And, if it wasn't for him, he was the last one standing, as we heard Attorney General Drew Wrigley say. And, I mean, it is just incredible knowing that your fellow officers were already down on the ground and he was able to keep his composure and get the job done. There's starting to be more and more people, you guys, filtering in. Sheriff Johnner has just arrived, and more other people. A lot of them, like I said, they have badges on and I don't recognize them, so I'm guessing they're with FBI and BCI, and then, of course, additional Fargo police officers and some other city leaders now starting to float in here to the commission chambers. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to pop into the commission chambers and get myself set up in there.
That sounds good, Bonnie. Thank you for that, and we'll check in with you after the press conference as well, as we all try to process what we're about to hear in just a few minutes. Thank you, Bonnie. Steve Hallstrom, Tom Tucker here with you, taking you up until 10:30, which is the expected time of the press conference. When we come back here on WDAY and the Flag Radio and our web and online properties as well, we're going to update you on some of the more recent happenings. What are some of the things that we have learned over the last 24 hours? We will update you on those things and continue to get you ready for this press conference. You're listening to live coverage of a press conference that's expected to happen at the bottom of the hour, held by the North Dakota BCI and the FBI on AM 1100 The Flag and FM 92.3 and WDAY AM 970 and FM 93.1. We'll be right back.
No matter where you are in life, you need a car you can trust. That's why you see so many Subarus on the road today. Subaru comes with 4-season symmetrical all-wheel drive standard. Check out Muscatel's in-stock inventory now, or claim one of Muscatel Subaru's incoming models, and you can enjoy Subaru safety that much sooner. Muscatel Subaru, just off the interstate in Moorhead, or online at muscatelsubaru.com. Subaru, built to last.
Hey, this is Shane with Irie Insurance. To get the splash, you risk the crash. To get the zoom, you risk the boom.
Oh my, look out!
Whoa!
So, all you water lovers, make sure that you're covered. Come see us. Protect your assets and put your mind at ease with quality recreational coverage from Irie Insurance. We've got the policy you need at a price you can afford, so you can brave the waves and enjoy the waters worry-free. Visit us at IrieInsurance.com.
Hello, this is Matt Lehman and Mike Walski with Fargo Roofing and Siding.
Due to the recent hailstorms that have hit the area, your insurance company may owe you a new roof, gutters, and more.
Fargo Roofing and Siding is your advocate through the insurance claim process. Make sure you call us before you file a claim.
To schedule your free hail inspection, visit us online at fargoroofing.com.
Premium quality, premium service, Fargo values, Fargo Roofing and Siding.
Are you ready to rev up your summer? Get ready for an adrenaline-fueled adventure like never before. It's time to hit the open road and experience the thrill of a lifetime. And now, Harley-Davidson of Fargo is turning up the heat with an unbeatable offer. From now until July 31st, we're giving you the opportunity to get more for your trade than it's worth. Trade up to any new in-stock Harley-Davidson motorcycle and receive a jaw-dropping 120% NADA book value for your current ride. But that's not all. If you've got your sights set on the ultimate adventure, we've got the perfect bike for you. Introducing the Harley-Davidson Pan America, the bike that never stops exploring. We're offering NADA retail value for your trade when you purchase a new Harley-Davidson Pan America. Unleash your wanderlust and conquer new horizons with this versatile and powerful machine. So what are you waiting for? Get the trade-in deal of a lifetime and experience the thrill of the open road on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle today. Visit Harley-Davidson of Fargo or give them a call at 701-277-1000 to learn more. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Ride into adventure with Harley-Davidson of Fargo.
It's about tradition, values, and family ties. Pucklet Chevrolet GMC's tradition of giving back to our community remains a priority, and that's why we've partnered with many local nonprofit organizations and events. And our tradition of giving this community a fair and honest offer continues. Right now, you can save over $6,000 on select new Chevy Silverado 1500s. We're Pucklet Chevrolet GMC in Valley City. Tradition, values, and family ties.
See dealer for details.
Funeral arrangements now have been made for the celebration of the life of young Jake Willeen, who died 1 week ago today in this tragic shooting incident that we have been talking about basically nonstop for the last week or so. A funeral will be held tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. at Pequot Lakes High School, with final law enforcement honors following the funeral service at Pequot Lakes High School. There will be a processional for law enforcement for Fargo Police Department that will leave Fargo at 5:45 a.m., arriving at approximately 9 a.m. The law enforcement escort will be limited to only Fargo PD vehicles and commercial buses that are transporting Fargo police personnel. I've heard some conversation about, hey, if you want an enjoyable ride or a ride to kind of show their support, follow along with them. They're not asking you to do that. They are asking people along the route to maybe wave and show support just by standing as the processional goes by. But this is not meant to be a community involvement escort there. Fargo PD will escort the officers and those attending. And you can find those details on our website, wdayradionow.com or am1100theflag.com, where that route is. But they'll be headed eastbound to Pequot Lakes tomorrow. And then coming up on Wednesday of next week, there will be a public celebration of life service. The funeral tomorrow is just for friends and family, but there will be a public celebration that will be happening at Shields Arena. If you remember right, that's where the Jason Mosier service took place as well after he was gunned down back, I believe that was 2016. And that will be Wednesday at 1 p.m. at Shields Arena. There will be additional information released on the order of events and so forth coming up at a later time as well. So that is what is being planned here to honor the life of Jake Willeen. The other two officers, Dodas and Hawes, who were hit by gunfire, the last update we had from them is that they were still in critical but stable condition. When we heard on Wednesday from law enforcement and Dave Zibolski, he said that he had some interaction with them and that they were both in good spirits. And so that you'd assume means you can see that there was communication going back and forth and that they were able to be conscious and aware of at least that conversation. So I think that did us all good to hear that as well.
Yeah, one highlight, Steve, associated with that is that Tyler Hawes, the chief is telling the chief that he is wanting to get back to work. He says he's ready to get back.
Yeah, and one of the comments I think that we'd heard from the family is that even if Jake knew that he was going to get shot, he'd have still come to work on that day because it's what he does. It's what he did. It's who he was. Amazing courage by these people, no question about it. Let's take a look at some of the headlines that have been making the rounds here over the last 24 hours as we get ready for this press conference, which is expected to come our way here sometime in the next 5 to 10 minutes. One note, the forum has done a solid job of thinking of different angles on this, and they report that the gunman Bearcat used a local shooting range, Red River Regional Marksmanship Center in West Fargo, to practice shooting. And they say that he also studied emergency medical services at an area college. The forum contacted multiple shooting ranges in the region and found that he did use the Red River Regional Marksmanship Center for target practice. The spokesperson there said, all I can tell you is he's been here to our place, and they did not either know or did not wish to disclose any details about how often he was there or what kind of guns that he used at that facility. And other gun ranges contacted by the forum would not comment or said Bearcat did not use their facilities. Tom, other headlines have been coming forward.
Sure, Steve. The forum has also produced a report in which they've talked with representatives from some of the representatives of the Muslim community here in the FM Metro, and those they spoke with are disavowing this act and say that they will not participate in or support in any burial services for Mohammed Bearcat. So it is interesting to see those representatives speaking out in this way, disavowing this horrific shooting. I also have some updated information with regard to donations. There's a huge response across the Metro, as you know, various groups and organizations raising money right now. Donations can be made to the Leadership Care Fund Incorporated. That's a nonprofit registered with the state of North Dakota. And donations can be made to the fund at any Bell Bank location or online at leadershipcarefund.com. That site does not collect any fees ensuring that all the money will go directly to the Wallin, Dotus, and Hawes families. Also, GoFundMe has campaigns going right now for Tyler Hawes and Andrew Dotus. For Tyler Hawes, the total is about $31,000 right now. For Officer Dotus, $65,000. And a number of local businesses are putting on fundraisers as well. We've reported on Sandy's Donuts offering a donut with proceeds from the sales, going to support the officers' families. Custom Graphics, they're putting on a fundraiser offering yard signs for donations with the slogan, "We are Fargo PD," which the mayor referenced the other day. Also, blue lights are being offered for sale, and Superior Customs made the police decals that we now have available at our front desk here at Flag Family Media on Thunder Road. My understanding is so far we have raised more than $5,000 with this particular effort. The Thin Blue Line American flag sticker, Wallin, End of Watch, I believe our Jay Thomas initiated that. And so far that has raised about $2,200. So great to see a number of businesses, organizations, individuals taking leadership and raising funds for these families.
Tom, you mentioned the story about the local Muslim community condemning this, and I think this is notable in our community because we are all wondering, was he part of a group of some kind? How did he come here? What was his status? And the fact that members of the Muslim community are being so strong in their denouncement of this, I think is helpful in healing for our community. Sajid Gori is an advisor to the Moorhead Mosque, known as the Moorhead Fargo Islamic Center, quoted in the forum story that you referenced, Tom. And Gori was quoted as saying, "We have no clue whether he was even Muslim because his action doesn't show that. With that being said, we refuse to do a funeral or burial in this area. Even if he's a member, he can't mess with our community like that." I think comments like that and approaches like that will definitely help our community heal and find some common ground and maybe cause the temperature of some of those conversations to be diminished as well. So I think that's notable and certainly welcome to hear from our community members of the Muslim community. It's 10:28 here on the program, and Tom, you mentioned also about the stickers, the decals available here. A lot of people are coming to our offices and picking up one of those. We will give them out, a limit of 3 per person, and it is a basically a free will donation. And Tom's holding one up there. It's a little hard to see it on the wide shot there, but you can see what it looks like. And just a nice support to put out in the community on a vehicle or your laptop, computer, whatever you might be able to use that for. I have also, Tom, been encouraged to see a number of blue lights appearing on homes and businesses around the region as well. And we were able to find one blue light bulb, and so we've got one out of the front of our house as well. And those things are very, very therapeutic and welcomed by the law enforcement community. We are expecting the broadcast of the press conference to begin momentarily here, and so we're standing by for that. After the press conference is done, we will come back to our studios here, and we will break down what we heard in that press conference and try to restate some of the main points. Bonnie Amistadi down at City Hall as well will weigh in and potentially have some folks that can weigh in with some additional perspective after the press conference today.
You talk about the community support, the community response, and I was having a conversation with our Ty Schonert in the newsroom here just a short while ago. And in some ways, it's almost kind of a silver lining to see how the community has responded, to this horrific incident. In many ways, I feel like many of us have bonded through this experience, right? It's a time where we can show care and support and love for those that we work with and other people in the community. So again, almost like a silver lining with the way the community has pulled together in response to this, Steve.
There is always that piece of how do we deal with this? How do we come through it? We remember 9/11, those of us who were kind of in the news world back then, and that was a time that we all kind of were reminded, you know what, we are all Americans and we have our differences and we have our frustrations and struggles, and not everybody gets along with everybody in our country all the time. But there is also that time when tragedy happens and people come together and say, you know what, let's put all that aside for a little bit. Let's remember what we have and let's be thankful for the good things that happen in our community as well. And as you said, to see so many people from different factions in our community come together and say, this is not who we are in this part of the world. I think it's reminded us all that, yes, there is evil, there is dark, there are people who will do unspeakable things, but those are still a very, very small minority. We maybe see those things happen more than we would like to, but still very rare in our part of the world. And when you think about how that event unfolded last Friday and what certainly could have happened, the speculation is that he was headed downtown where the street fair was taking place, where you have people packed in like sardines and nobody's worried about getting shot. They're worried about having a good time on a Friday afternoon in the summer. And we hope to hear more today about why Drew Wrigley thought he was headed downtown and maybe a little bit more about who Mohammed Bearcat is. Hopefully we can hear some of those things today.
Steve, those are just a couple of questions that still remain, and a long line of questions, not only for us here in the media, but for the entire community as well. And hopefully we get some of these answers here in this press conference, which is supposed to start here at any moment. But, some of the remaining questions are, again, the motive. Why did Mohammed Bearcat do this? Will authorities classify this as an act of terrorism? If not, why not? That question was asked to Drew Wrigley on Wednesday. He deferred on that to the federal authorities, FBI. Perhaps we'll get some input on that as well. Was a manifesto left behind? Did religious belief play any role in this? Was Bearcat working with others? And what do we know about his life and connections in Syria before he came to the United States?
All those things are questions that we are all wondering, no question about it. And when you get those answers and you get some information, it just tends to settle people down. I think we heard a lot of that the other day, even though some of the details were unsettling, even though it was difficult to hear, difficult to look at some of those things. Just the fact to hear that just helps us get our heads around it. And right now, there's still so much of this that we don't understand, that hopefully that process can continue today with the different information that comes our way. And so we are hoping for more of those things. And certainly we understand that this is an active, ongoing investigation. And because of it, there are certain things that we're not going to be able to find out. And nor would we want to find out about them if they will jeopardize an investigation. And as you mentioned, Tom, if he is with a group of other people that were planning to carry this out, going back all the way to the Columbine shooting in Colorado, there was multiple people. That was kind of the first big mass event like this that kind of precipitated, unfortunately, more events like this that happened. It was Harris and Klebold, two kids from the community that were acting together. And so are there others that are planning on doing something similar, or was this really a lone wolf situation? From what we understand, he certainly seemed to be a loner, not much communication, didn't have much in the way of social media accounts. His photo's not out there anywhere. And so he is a mystery man, no question about that.
Yeah, he certainly is. We've been, trying to find a photo of him. The only photo that we are aware of that exists is with the Department of Motor Vehicles here in the state of North Dakota. Drew Wrigley is now at the podium at City Hall. Let's go ahead now to him live in downtown Fargo.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Attorney General. I see some unfamiliar faces, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Attorney General Drew Wrigley. Others will be introduced as we go throughout here today, but I do want to note Chief Deputy Attorney General for North Dakota, Claire Ness. Also up here with us, Chief Agent Casey Miller from the BCI, and we've got a number of BCI agents here on the back wall, and I want to thank them publicly for the work across the last week in conjunction with so many others in law enforcement. And there's going to be a lot of that sort of talk in the days ahead, every bit of it very justified. We should begin this morning where we should always begin, in prayerful thanks. Even at a time like this, prayerful thanks with humble grace, and thanks for the peacekeepers, many of whom are here today, all of whom should know that they are remembered here today. We are this morning reconvening, the communication this week in the wake of last week's horrible Friday afternoon events. We were in here this week on Wednesday to talk about the heroic efforts, the life-saving efforts of police officer Zach Robinson. In the face of a savage attack, we concluded and announced that his actions were reasonable, his actions were justified, his actions were in all ways lawful. To which we would add courageous, to which we would add selfless. We want to caution you as we get started here today that this remains an active investigation. What we're doing today is a little out of the ordinary in that we're talking about this matter before the conclusion of that investigation. But for a variety of reasons, it's important that we do so, and I want to thank all the law enforcement leaders who are up here today. Not all of whom will talk today, but we're all available for your questions. Please keep in mind also that this is the best information that we have as of today. I know things today that a couple of days ago looked a little murkier. We're going to answer the questions that we can answer. We're going to answer questions that we can responsibly answer. So that'll begin. There's going to be some photos up on the screen from time to time. I can tell you there will be nothing that will be ghoulish or along those lines. But we want to convey the best information that we can. These times remain, just take them for their close, the best approximations that we have. Sometimes because things are time-stamped, what have you. But it's the best information that we have. It's almost hard to believe, at my first line looking down here, that such events can transpire in the wake of a fender bender. A fender bender in Fargo, North Dakota. 2:42 p.m., there's a two-vehicle fender bender on 25th Street South. The vehicles were proceeding south. They were just north of 9th Avenue. Carly Coswick, who had just recently moved here to Fargo, was in one of those vehicles. She was alone in the vehicle. She was driving. The other vehicle had multiple occupants. Fargo Fire was the first on the scene in response to the call that went out. They arrived on the scene at 2:48 p.m. A minute later, Fargo police arrived at 2:49 p.m. That was officers Andrew Dotis and Tyler Hawes. Minutes later, and when I'm referencing these matters, we have an array of videotape from the public, from private sources, and from law enforcement. I'll cobble those together. It was minutes later that Mohammed Barakat first appeared in the video. He was driving northbound on 25th. He had not yet gotten to the 9th Avenue crossroad when he came into the Big Top Bingo video feed. So he's south of the crash. The crash would have been off to his left and just a little bit north. He took that left turn onto 9th Avenue and then immediately took a right turn into the parking lot that was just adjacent to 25th and where the crash was. So he pulled immediately into that parking lot. At this point, only officers Hawes and Dotis are at the scene, along with the fire crew that got there first. So only have the two officers. He pulls in, and he's sitting in his vehicle facing 25th. The distance between him and the crash at that point would be about here to the second row, where I'm standing to the second row. And he sat there for a while observing the scene. The lights are flashing. As you can imagine, we've all seen how many crash scenes. Minutes later, he pulls out of that spot and he drives back onto 9th Street. Onto 9th Street, but then kind of twists a little bit, goes over to Big Top Bingo and parks in the parking lot. Again, he spends a short time there, still in full view of the crash. Officers still on scene. After a couple of minutes, he drives out of the north side of that parking lot, takes a right turn, and gets stopped at the light. He's there for several minutes. At that point, the crash is off to his left. 20, 30 feet away, able to observe the officers at the scene, the Fargo fire at the scene. Barakat continues across 25th and into the trailer park on the other side. Takes the first, I guess you'd say the first block in, he takes a left turn and heads north and goes out of view of the video feed from Big Top Bingo. He's out of view for several minutes. Out of view for several minutes, and then you see him emerge again. Now in the alley that is to the west of the parking lot where he parked in the first instance. I'm going to put up a picture. If I can first, put up image number 1. This is Mohammed Barakat. You'll forgive the lack of resolution. It's from a video. It's the best we could do at this time. I'm working on other photos, and we'll have a request at the end of our proceedings today. Could you please go to item number 2? I'm just going to get you oriented on this. Bear with me, but I think it helps to have a picture in your mind. This is the overhead shot. Is this not going to work on there? No, it works in my hand. Doesn't work on there. Okay, well, I'll point at it. You see where the police cars are down here. That's where the crash, this is later on, everything's cleared. This is not during this incident, but this is where the crash took place out on 25th. That's the parking lot. Just on the top of that is the parking lot where Barakat was parked. Actually, that's still his vehicle. The furthest one to the right is still his vehicle. This is sometime after. Then there's that building. It's a private businesses there. Big Top Bingo is off to the left. The trailer park that I mentioned would be in the foreground on this side. So you've got south, north to the right, west and east. Okay, so when I mentioned now he's in the alley after reemerging, getting back on the video, he's in the alley right behind that building. And we see him come back into frame, and he proceeds south on that alley, goes around the side of that building, and again parks right there where he's in full view of the crash scene and the officers' activity. At 3:03, now remember those other times, at 3:03 p.m., Officers Robinson and Jake Wallin show up at the scene. They are now the third and fourth officers to respond to the scene, and they show up while the defendant, who's now been casing this out for all those minutes, driving at it and coming at it from different angles, now he's sitting there watching, waiting for additional law enforcement, and they came. Now you got a total of 4 Fargo police officers out there as of 3:03 p.m. At almost that exact time, one of the vehicles, and again, bear with me, I'm not going through this because we're all working on traffic reconstruction here. These will all be relevant points. At some point right there, almost immediately after those 2 officers arrived, one of the crash vehicles drives up. You're going to start clearing the road. It drives forward, 20, 30 feet to 9th, takes a right, goes around, and comes right into the parking lot. And it is parked on our image here to the left of it's the middle of the 3 cars there. Forget about the one on the left, far left. It's the middle of the 3 cars there. That's the vehicle that was run into. That was the furthest south vehicle that was run into and had multiple occupants in it. They parked their vehicle right there next to Barakat, who's still in his vehicle in the driver's seat, looking out. Incidentally, he has spray painted all the windows in the back of his vehicle. Nobody can see into it. From a distance, it would look tinted. Standing next to it, you'd realize there's something else going on here. I can't see in there at all. But nobody noticed anything out of the ordinary, and they wouldn't have any cause to. The police are handling their site, and the defendant's just laying in wait inside that vehicle. The individuals in the crash vehicle, they get out. Now they want to look at the damage to their vehicle. Get out. They've got their cell phones out. They're taking pictures, I suppose making calls and talking behind there, waiting for police to come over and talk to them. Carly is on the sidewalk. She's on the sidewalk almost directly in front of where the defendant's vehicle is facing. She's down on the sidewalk. Her vehicle remains out in the street. That's important in a moment too. At this point, and I'll get in a minute, we're not talking about much time having gone by here. A lot of activity, but not a lot of time has gone by. At this point, 3 Fargo police officers make their way up from the street, up into that lot, and start walking toward the crash vehicle to talk with those individuals. But remember, that will then require, they'll have to walk past Barakat's vehicle, and he's sitting in there. The windows are open. The back is, you can't see into the back. He's sitting there. And when they first start walking, I'm, again, estimating 30, 40 feet away. They can't see into there and see that lying next to him on the seat is the double magazined .223 long rifle. That's Police Officer Jake Wallin, Police Officer Andrew Otis, and Police Officer Tyler Hawes. Officer Robinson remains in the street. He remained in the street because the fire truck was going to be pulled away and going to be leaving, and his concern was there'd be too much space that was open there, and he was worried that someone would come along, go into the turn lane, and maybe we'd have another accident. So he walked around. He was on the other side of Carly's car, just waiting for what was going to come next, and he's going to go back and move his police vehicle up. But as officers Wallin, Otis, and Hawes started to make their way to talk to those other people, they're getting closer and closer to Barakat's vehicle with the open window. We're not releasing today the body cam videos. We will be in the fullness of time. When the time is appropriate. As they approach, best estimate I'm able to give you 10, 15 feet away. Barakat takes out his long rifle. It's scoped. It's got a double mag. He's loaded. He's got 60 rounds available to him. And what that is they're side by side. You use one up, and all you have to do is push the other one over, and you've got the access to the other 30. That becomes a relevant point also, beside the obvious. He opens fire. Barakat opens fire on the officers, and as Officer Robinson described to my BCI agent when telling about, giving his recount of what had happened, and as verified by listening to the audio, it is, he believed it to be, and reasonably so, automatic fire. It is rapid, rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, all made possible because of what is known as a binary trigger.
Drew Wrigley experiencing some microphone difficulties there. They're trying to swap out a new microphone.
Okay, thank you. That's right. All possible because of what's known as a binary trigger. Aftermarket, legal, purposeless. Pull around, let go around. Pull around, let go around. Everything you hit, you'll hit twice because you got the binary trigger. That's relevant for obvious. It appears that Fargo police officer Jake Wallin is the first struck. But it happened so rapidly, there's no way to really know which of them, and I don't know that it matters. But he was about a foot and a half ahead, step and a half ahead of the other two officers. But in rapid succession, Otis and Hawes are hit. All of them are hit. None of the officers even has so much as an opportunity to turn, to crouch, to grab for their service weapon, nothing. It's that rapid. They drop, drop, drop. Each of the officers, terms later, stumbled, willed their way a little ways. In the wake of the shooting. Now, there's no pause in anything that I'm describing to you. I'm just trying the best that I can.
Again, some technical difficulties down at City Hall as Drew Wrigley is trying to speak, but we've had some distortion the entire time.
Vehicle and do the only thing they can do. They're crouching for their lives. They're crouching for their lives over behind the vehicle that they've just been in this accident with. Officer Robinson, who's out on the other side of that vehicle, God bless him, I'll tell you. One of the things he asks our investigator later, did I remember to call it in? Yeah. Calm. Calling it in. Shots fired, knowing he's the last officer. He doesn't call that in. There's no knowing what happens next. I mean, if he doesn't get that called in before something happens to him, is what I'm saying. Calls it in, stands up, and immediately engages. Having no idea, especially in light of all the rapid fire. He has no idea how many weapons he's facing. No idea. No idea. About 1.5 times, I would say, between myself and Mike McFeely, about 1.5 times that distance, back here in the purple shirt, he's engaging a guy with a long rifle, scoped, sitting in his car, still sitting in the car, and the officer is away from his vehicle. He's got his service weapon, and he engages. Barakat is not hit in that barrage from the officer. And he wouldn't be. There's not much space there, and he's inside of his vehicle. Barakat jumps out of the vehicle, opens the door, and runs around the back of his vehicle, positions himself on the passenger side, and has a direct line at the officer, who's that distance I just described. We think it's about 75 feet. Barakat, with his scoped weapons, got a direct line. Officer Robinson is obstructed by the crash vehicle, maybe to his waist, and he's firing direct on. At some point, again, this is all instantaneous. Carly does what any of us would do. She tries to take cover. She was on the sidewalk, remember. She runs to try to get behind a tree. And it ain't much of a tree, but it's something. She makes it a couple of steps. The defendant sees her moving. So intent is he with his murderous resolve. He sees her moving. He goes off of the officer and comes over and shoots her. Again, striking his victim with multiple rounds. She's down immediately, severely injured. In that instant, when he turned mildly profile, Officer Robinson, and he says, when he's talking to the BCI agents days later, he tells them, he knew he'd popped off several rounds when Barakat was in the car. Now he's got him around. He knows he's standing up. He sees what's happened. He knows he's got officers down. He knows he's got the civilian down. Knows he's got other civilians just off the side. And he tells himself, just squeeze. Careful, squeeze. And he does. He hits the long rifle and incapacitates it. I don't think he'll tell you he was aiming for the long rifle. He's aiming for center mass, but he hits the long rifle. It's incapacitated, and he also hits Barakat. But Barakat's far from done. He takes the round, and he goes down. Now, Robinson comes from around the vehicle and is closing. At great peril to himself. Again, remember, he has no way to know if there are other gunmen, and this one's still moving. 16 times between there and the end of this whole, 16 times he directs the defendant to raise his hands, and the defendant does at one point with a 9mm in his hand that he's trying desperately to charge. charge. Get a round in the chamber. Drop the gun. Drop the gun. He doesn't drop the gun. Officer again fires. Barakat continues to move as the officer moves closer. This is where he calls in. I have 3 shots fired. I have 3 officers down. I have 3 officers down. Send everybody. I don't know if there's a more lonely human being on this planet than Officer Zach Robinson closing in on that scene. He's got 3 officers down. He's got a civilian who's been shot. He's got a guy he's closing in on that he's hoping like hell is the only shooter out here. Officer Robinson continues up through the grass toward Barakat's vehicle. He goes to the driver's side to keep the vehicle between himself and Barakat. Still, no other officers have been able to respond. This has happened so rapidly as they go along. I should have mentioned, and I didn't, it was 2 minutes. 2 minutes from when officers Wallin and Robinson arrived at the scene. A little under 2 minutes before gunfire erupted. All that was taking place in that period, 2 minutes. Now Robinson is walking around behind the vehicle, coming around to the passenger side back there. Again, he's got the civilians hiding behind the car just off to the, what would be the south there. And one last time, one final time, showing the restraint that I can't imagine God giving anyone under these circumstances. He says, again, drop your gun. He comes out from behind the vehicle. The defendant still has the gun in his hand. He's lying there. And the force used by the officer neutralizes Mohammed Barakat. When you're watching this, from the moment that the shooting starts, especially in hindsight when you know the weaponry that Barakat had in that vehicle and in his hands. He had 2 handguns on him, including the 9mm I just referenced, and he had the long rifle. It's difficult to overstate how dramatically, especially at that distance, how dramatically outgunned police officer Zach Robinson was. And you're going to have to rely on my recitation for now, but you'll see that body cam video in time, and I know we'll all agree. That man was never outmanned. It was 3:06 and 34 seconds when Officer Robinson finally neutralized the defendant, who remained alive but in significant distress. Robinson remaining composed. Another officer, Officer Clower, is now at the scene. Again, these moments have passed. He must have been close by. He's now on the scene. He came right to Robinson's side. Robinson directs that he cuff him, which you got to do because he's still moving. They cuff him. And Officer Robinson immediately makes his way to his fallen brother officers and to the area where they are being treated along with Carly. And eventually they're all being treated by Fargo Fire, Fargo Police who are on the scene, and each of them surrounded by a blue wall, man. People around them literally encouraging them to live. Stay with us. Stay with us, Andrew. Saying his name, squeezing his hand, massaging his shoulders, doing everything they can. Robinson's right there too. All the fire and rescue people. All the Fargo police responding to this scene. All the law enforcement. Not intentionally leaving anyone else out. You'll understand. We didn't have these reports yet. I've got all the information. We've been in all these meetings, but not intentionally leaving anyone out. It would be horrific enough if this were the end. If that was all we knew, and that was the end of these horrible events in the wake of the fender bender on 25th Street South. Officer Robinson and the others, it would be heroic enough if we only knew that he had so courageously stood our enemy down. But as the investigation in the ensuing week has made clear, the thin blue line was severely, severely tested. Fargo police officer Zach Robinson was indeed the last man standing in that blue line at that moment. What he was standing between was not just the horrible events that were unfolding there, but between the horrible events that Mohammed Barakat had planned, had envisioned, planned, and intended, and armed himself for beyond fully that day. In the wake of these events, law enforcement was moving rapidly, and I thank all of our law enforcement partners. We had tremendous help from the North Dakota Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Office, the other police departments, the FBI, federal law enforcement. My friend Max Schneider, our U.S. Attorney, is here today, and he's going to be talking a little bit too. Search warrants. Quickly ascertained what his residence was. We had to get into the vehicle. Law enforcement got eyes on the vehicle, realized when they look in the back, they got a situation on our hands. The bomb squad was called in at one point, and the bomb sniffing dog hit on the vehicle, as it later hit on his private residence in South Fargo. I'll get in a moment to some of the items seized in the vehicle, but I wanted to say that the search warrant was attained in federal court later that night, and the search itself took place in the late night, morning hours the next day. First, the vehicle. If you could put up photo number 3, please. This is Barakat's vehicle. See, position exactly where it was, unmoved from the events I just described. There in the back seat, you can see one of the firearms down on the ground, I think it is. And then there are containers. There were 3 largish gas containers, actually only 2 of them were gasoline containers. The third was another container, but they all had gasoline, all filled with gasoline. They find in the vehicle 2 innocuous-looking propane tanks you might have for your Weber grill. But what they discovered was that they were filled, one completed at the top, the other one halfway up, with explosive materials concocted at home, purchased lawfully, compiled in his home. 2 of those in this vehicle. Switch to photo number 4, please, quickly. Yeah, just real quick. There's those items. Simple looking canisters for the gasoline, and then the 2 propane tanks as well. Item number 5 we showed you the other day. We'll show you that quickly. This was a self-styled hand grenade. Works, by the way. Fuse lighted. That was in the vehicle as well. And then go to item number 6. These are the items seized from the vehicle at the scene of these atrocities. Number of weapons. A .380 semi-automatic handgun remained in the vehicle during this event. 9mm handgun utilized as I described. I don't have a better way to describe this. An AK-styled rifle, not used in this event. Well, used, right? I mean, it's in the vehicle, though. And then the 223-round weapon used by Barakat to kill Officer Waleen and injure the others. Also at the scene, 40 caliber handgun. That was on the defendant as well, in addition to the 9mm that he was brandishing. And then there was another 9mm in the vehicle. So you got a total of 4 handguns, all semi-automatics, and 2 semi-automatic long rifles, 3, semi-automatic long rifles, one and only one, and the one he picked with a binary trigger. Search warrant conducted at the residence in the aftermath. A variety of items. The FBI was kind enough to carry out those. Kind was just a bad choice of words, Mac. I didn't. We appreciate it very much. The FBI sat on the residence, waited for the search warrant to come through. Mac and his team were working on it that night, got it signed by a federal judge, and they went in for the search the next day. A 12-gauge shotgun, another 12-gauge shotgun, a 22 caliber handgun, a Remington Model 700 deer rifle. That's going to sound familiar to a lot of us in the room. A very standard deer rifle weapon. Another 223 rounded rifle, and a 9mm handgun. An array of live ammunition on the premises, strewn about. A number of trail cameras inside his residence. And there's maybe also in his storage garage or the garage along with the unit, but there were a number of these trail cams. Several phones and one computer and a variety of grenade parts. Those items are all seized, obviously, in relation to this investigation. In the next days, the forensics investigator experts with the BCI, I see some legislators here in the room, you just approved 4 more of these. This is why. They are expert, but there are only so many of them. And thankfully, we had the folks to get right on this. They worked around the clock on these computers, understanding that we may have a situation where there are other proximate dangers that we need to address immediately. I cannot thank them enough for their tireless work. Tireless isn't the right word. I'm sure they were tired, but they weren't sleeping, and they were getting through this on all of your behalf. Figured out a long, interesting, not a social media presence, not a lot of interaction or people with whom he would interact. We are continuing down every lead that we have from these phones and from the electronics and community contacting other people with knowledge about him. The fact that we're having this gathering with you today and then one a couple days ago, in part, should reassure you that we don't at this moment see additional threat emanating out of this incident. At this moment, if that were to change, you will know. We will let you know. That's our obligation, and that's what we'll do, of course. Numbers of searches. Interesting topics. Explosive ammo. Kill fast. Incendiary rounds. Mass shooting events. How to, I guess. Going through all mass shooting events around the country, picking up what he could from reading about other events that have taken place. We've all heard copycats, no word unknown to law enforcement. Mass shooting events. Chillingly, area events. Area events where there are crowds in the Fargo Moorhead area, Cass County area, all around. Singled out a few as he went along. And on the last search, on the last night at 10:30 p.m. on July 13th, quote, thousands enjoy first day of downtown Fargo street fair. There have been inquiries about the why. What's the motive? I've been in and out of law enforcement for 30 years. You might be surprised to know how many times you finish up and you're still scratching your head. You're still scratching your head. Motive, obvious motive to kill. I mean, driven by hate, driven by wanting to kill. Not particularized to some group that we can discern at this moment. Not particularized to one individual that we can see. The horrible winds of fate It's the best explanation I have for you for how he saw those officers on the way to where we believe he was going. And his pattern of when he got there, just casing it out and driving around, sitting for several minutes and sizing it up, maybe he knew there would be more law enforcement showing up. And he guessed right. But he was very patient, going around, looking at it from all sides, just waiting. There would be no way that he would have known that event couldn't have, obviously. It's a fender bender in South Fargo. And he's just proceeding. He'd come a long ways up 25th. Horrible, horrible winds of fate. In an instance like this, I'm not a mental health professional, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. But officers who lived through something like this, who maybe they responded as fast as they could and they couldn't get there fast enough. Others. The officers on the scene who were ambushed so completely, they had no ability, no moment, no instant to even reach for their weapons. Wondering, what else could I have done? Should I check that? What else should I have done? They did all. They did all. We've described Officer Robinson's heroics. But every man and woman, you all know this, everyone who raises their hand and they take that oath and they don that uniform and they carry that badge knows that this it does happen all across this country, routinely. And here too, we're not unknown to this. Every one of them. I know I think they're feeling this from all of you, from the community, recognition, whatever their role on that day. You were part of the line. You stood between these murderous intentions and acts. One officer remaining. He goes down, 5, 6 blocks to downtown Fargo. The heroics that it took to preserve the lives of Carly, of Andrew, of Tyler. There wouldn't have been enough emergency personnel within a 3-state area to meet the needs. This is a painful week for law enforcement. It's also a reminder of the heroism of law enforcement. And if I could say on their behalf, because I've heard it from them in the last week too, it's also a reminder of how good you are. I've thought it many times in my life and career. The public doesn't get enough credit. You're good. You care. They see it. They feel it. I want to thank you on their behalf for that. There's going to be some other comments here, and we'll look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Wrigley. My name is Max Schneider. I'm the United States Attorney for the District of North Dakota. And on behalf of the Department of Justice, I want to express my sincerest condolences to the officers, their families, and the Fargo Police Department in the wake of this senseless violence. And I also want to share our deep gratitude for the heroism of the 4 officers and the courage and selflessness shown by Officer Zachary Robinson, whose grace under unimaginable pressure averted further tragedy, as the Attorney General described. I want to speak today, to the extent that I'm able, about the efforts of Fargo or federal law enforcement undertaken since last Friday. And I also want to touch on the efforts still to come. Let me first say that there is no daylight between federal law enforcement and our state partners when it comes to responding to this terrible crime. I've been in regular contact with Attorney General Wrigley since last Friday, and in that time, we have seen absolutely seamless coordination between the FBI, the ATF, and our state partners at BCI. They are true professionals and the best partners in the truest sense of the word. Last Friday, ATF agents from the Fargo field office responded to the officer-involved shooting within minutes of the incident. As has been discussed today and earlier this week, as shown on the screen, the deceased suspect was in the possession of an absolute arsenal of weapons and explosives that were with him at the scene at the time of the shooting. ATF has since conducted crime gun intelligence queries and analysis, interviews, and provided technical resources towards this investigation. And ATF continues to work closely within its areas of expertise with the FBI, BCI, Fargo Police Department, and other investigators. They're working to determine the motives of the deceased suspect, as well as to identify any co-conspirators. Likewise, the FBI's Minneapolis field office swiftly responded to the scene last Friday. They provided immediate assistance to the Fargo Police Department and to BCI. The scene was thoroughly assessed by the FBI, and the responsibilities for the ongoing investigation were divided amongst the agencies on the scene based on their areas of respective expertise. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the judicial process would be necessary to gather further evidence. Therefore, within hours of the shooting, the United States Attorney's Office, working with the FBI, obtained a federal search warrant for the deceased suspect's home. Pursuant to that warrant, the FBI began a search of the home alongside our partners at BCI, which also continued to investigate at the scene. As the Attorney General mentioned, FBI agents tirelessly searched the suspect's home through the early morning hours and into the day on Saturday. And while searching the residence, FBI agents came across a significant amount of evidence, as you've heard discussed today. That included the electronic devices that were described by the Attorney General. These electronic devices were lawfully seized and shared with BCI for the purpose of conducting an examination. Those devices and the other items recovered for evidentiary purposes are currently undergoing meticulous examination and evaluation. As our investigation continues, the FBI remains fully committed to working closely with our local, state, and federal partners. It's understandable and completely justified to want to know why. Why did this senseless violence happen? What could possibly motivate someone to ambush young officers in the line of duty? How could murderous chaos and this type of evil arise on a familiar street in Fargo, North Dakota? A week after this horrible tragedy, federal law enforcement agents are working around the clock with their state counterparts at BCI to find answers. And as that investigation continues, I want to be clear about three things. Number one, after an aggressive review of the evidence thus far, we have no reason to believe the public is in further danger. Number two, even at this early stage of the investigation, if there was clear evidence of motive, we would share it. And number three, when this investigation has been concluded and no stone is left unturned, we will update the public as we are able. That will either be at a briefing like this one, or it will be through our filings in court. In the meantime, federal law enforcement will continue to work closely with our partners at BCI on this important investigation. And we'll continue to hold the officers, their families, and the Fargo PD close in our hearts.
Thank you, sir. And thanks to all of our partners up here, have been tremendous. We have worked seamlessly with all of them and our community. We're very appreciative for those efforts. I want to provide a little bit of happy news to you in terms of Officer Dotis and Hawes. Yesterday, they were both able to stand up out of their beds briefly, which is miraculously very good news and a blessing for all of us. Very happy about that. They continue to have a significant road to recovery, not insurmountable, but we need those continued thoughts and prayers for them and their families who have gone through tremendous horror here in the last week. So I wanted to let everyone know about that, and as soon as they are in a position, we're excited to get them back with the rest of the team and the family and go from there. So that's a little bit of good news in all of the chaos that we've had to deal with. The other thing I'd like to reiterate, in knowing a little more about this now and listening to the Attorney General, it was clear that this individual was a calculated, insidious, murderous individual, dead set on hurting, killing as many people as possible. He had the intent, he had the commitment, he had the means. But for the intervention of our courageous and brave Fargo PD personnel. Zach Robinson, obviously without doubt, courageous, the last man there to prevent war from happening. But all of our officers, Jake Willeen, likely the first person hit. That would seem to me to make a lot of sense based on his fatal injury. He took that bullet that someone else in our community might have otherwise taken. Andrew Dotis, Tyler Hawes, took other bullets that other people in our community would have otherwise likely taken. And so I don't want it lost on anyone that all of these folks, including our firefighters who were out there in a very dangerous situation, did the very best they could to keep all of us safe. And there's a lot of concern, legitimate concern, about other threats and dangers to the community. We agree. We're concerned as well. We've been meeting here with the mayor and others in evaluating our special events to see if there's other things that we can add for safety. And so you may see more visible signs to help prevent as much as we can. And there have always been and will continue to be other things that you don't see, but rest assured that our personnel are out there in many ways, both physically and from an intelligence platform, working with our state and federal, local partners to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent harm to our community and allowing you to go out and enjoy a beautiful city, entertainment, spend time with your family without fear of that type of activity occurring. But the reality also is there's evil in the world. This guy was one of them. He's an evil individual. And the only thing that stops evil are likely two things: an engaged, supportive community, which we have, their ability to communicate and let us know about things that they know or see. And we've seen this across the country as well, where some of these types of mass events have been upended by the good work of community members, sometimes family members, which can be very difficult. When the person is a member of your family, but you're seeing this and you know this isn't right and bad things might happen, we encourage that interaction. The only other option is the courageous intervention of our law enforcement personnel. And that's what happened on July 14th, and we should never forget that. We avoided, I think, a major catastrophe here in our city. And it's still a very big tragedy, the loss of Officer Willeen, Officers Dotis and Hawes, who are injured. That's going to be with us for a while. And then the heroic efforts of Officer Robinson as well. So, and think about all the personnel from Fargo PD who responded to this, giving life-saving efforts to their colleagues, right? So, tremendous work by the fire department. I just want you to know that we are safe. This is a safe city. But evil's out there. We're doing our best to look for it and prevent it. We appreciate your help in that effort as well. Thank you.
We're good for questions. Okay. Just one thing.
Yeah.
For Jake Willeen, we're going to have a funeral on Saturday in his hometown area. I just want to remind the public that next Wednesday at 1 o'clock at Shields Arena, we will have a memorial service and would ask the public to honor that Jake just started for our force, and sometimes it's hard to know all the wonderful things about the young man, but I think if the community can reach out and attend that would be tremendous. I appreciate all the GoFunding that people are doing for our officers that are wounded. Tremendous spirit amongst the team that's standing now. We all have a heavy heart, and I think many of us are grieving as this time goes on. But I would appreciate it if the community would turn out at the memorial service and honor the man that gave his life for us. Thank you.
One last thing before we get to questions. I wanted to put this phone number out there. This is, I'm told, the first photograph of Mohammed Barakat that's out publicly. I thought I had seen something in the earliest days of this, but it was internally with some reports. And so this photograph is out. We're going to find something with better resolution. But there could be people out there who might have interesting information. And I would just ask you to not judge for yourself maybe what's interesting. His comings and goings, associations, information you might have. I'd ask you to call the BCI, that information, 701, of course, 328, that's easy to remember, like every state number, but 5500, 328-5500, with any information you might have about whether it's this incident, something that you saw, or the comings and goings, the life and practices of Mohammed Barakat. That would be glad to take your questions. I would be remiss if I didn't pass this along too, and the mayor just mentioned this. In talking with the families of the injured officers, and yesterday I spoke, and with Carly's family, and yesterday I spoke with Jeff and Amy, Officer Wileen's parents. I hope that you know how much they feel the outpouring from everybody. I really hope the community understands that, because their hearts are running over. They have felt very, very supported. And that includes by the members of the Fargo Police Department, and a recognition of the life-giving care of the fire department. Chief, I know how proud you are, with good reason, and everyone else. And I was asked to pass that along, and I'm doing it publicly. The people of this region and these organizations need to be congratulated and thanked, because these families are feeling that love and support. With that, we'll take any questions that we're allowed to handle. We're going to have to make sure you got a microphone on you, because there are people watching remotely, so be patient with us if you could.
Can you share more details on Mohammed Barakat's background, as well as what specifically points to potentially further carnage at the street fair, I believe is the location you mentioned, Drew?
A little bit, not a great amount more about, we know a little bit more, but at this point, what I would share with you is he was a Syrian national. He came to the United States, we're told, I'm informed by our federal partners, came here on an asylum request in 2012. He became a U.S. citizen in 2019, working off and on different odd jobs, all of which, we're pursuing those matters and interviewing people, and that's about what I'm going to say about that. As to his specific intent, the months, actually across years, seems like he lost the will at one point, maybe if there was a pause in there, and then it regained again, where he's looking at the mass casualty events, looking for the impacts of specific types of injuries, looking for particular kinds of firepower that are available and certain kinds of bullets that are available, and then amassing this weaponry at all, and then moving significant amounts of it into his vehicle that day, including the last minutes. We've got video of him going out of his place with a suitcase in which he's got, more weapons, more rounds. So, his intent was pretty evident. As I said, in the days leading up to there, he's looking for, specifically to the region, for large crowd events in the region. And based on the time and the direction where he was going, he was either likely to be taking a right when he got to Main Avenue, going downtown, taking a left when he got to Main Avenue, and going out to the fairgrounds. Those are the two large events going on at that time. 1,800 rounds of ammunition in the vehicle, multiple weapons, which I just described, a vest. It was not a tactical vest. It wasn't a bulletproof vest, but he had a vest just absolutely stuffed with magazines. And one piece of information we picked up just yesterday, putting the finishing touches on his shooting skills in the last hours before this assault.
This question probably is for Mac. Was Barakat on the radar of federal agents or federal law enforcement at all prior to this?
I'm going to defer to the ongoing investigation on that, Tasha.
Last press conference, there was some talk about him being known, Bearcat being known a little bit to law enforcement to some degree, either local or federal. Can you explain anything more about that?
We know some more. I'm going to relay a little bit more. There were some contacts along the line of he had a fire in his place, cooking fire, I think it was, and there was some contact with the fire department. There was a report that was made some while back. I'm not going to go into the details of it, also because I don't have it. It's called the Guardian Report. It's a federal report of some kind. There was talk of him being on a watch list. Information that we have from our federal partners is he was not on the terrorist watch list, but there was this Guardian Report some years back made by a member, someone who was familiar with him or knew him. I'm not going to say much about it except to say it is not, we are told, about a threat of violence or an act of this nature or anything along these lines. I'm going to leave it at that.
What about any affiliations, religious, anything that you've discovered so far that you can disclose?
If I say to you that I'm not going to discuss that, there's going to be assumptions, right? People are going to say, oh, they think they know something. I would caution people along those lines. Actually, Mac and I talked about this a little bit this morning, and it is fair to say that we've established no ties even to the Muslim community here in the area. We have no ties been established in that regard. And beyond that, I don't have much. At this point, it seems more notable that he's Muslim than that I'm Lutheran. From where we're at with the investigation right now, that's fair. And I think we should put that out there.
Just wondering if you can give an update on the civilian who was shot.
Forgive me,
Can you give an update on this civilian who was shot?
I spoke to Carly's mother a couple of days ago, and I believe that Carly was moved out of the IC unit as well. I called her mom on the way down here today and I'm waiting for a call back. She was very seriously injured. She's got a medical road up ahead. She's in good spirits, though. I talked to her over the weekend, I think it was Saturday or Sunday, maybe both. She was in relatively good spirits having gone through this. I assured her that she's come to the right kind of community, told her a little bit about what I know about this place that my family's called home our whole lives. Came here and had great plans. I think has great plans, but she's got a hurdle here with her health, and I have every belief that she's going to make her way forward. She's got a little ways before she's going to be able to put some weight on things, but she was very severely injured. That's a high power round, and she's got a ways to go. But great parents. It was good to talk with them, and I know they appreciate the outpouring in this community that didn't even really know her daughter yet.
With Barakat having seemingly no online presence and the fact that he didn't seem very connected in the community, maybe wasn't communicating with people via cell phone much, what other are you looking into, or are others looking into some other means of communication he might have been using? And if so, what would those be? Like perhaps the dark web or something to that?
I'll just leave it at the perfectly reasonable question. I'm just going to leave it at yes. I mean, all pursuits are on. I mean, everything that they find when we go into the phones, I mean, those are a roadmap to your life, right? The phone, and get on the computer and see what that presence is. Everybody's got some presence. Everybody's got some footprint. And, you keep going through financial documents, financial records, anything that you can find. Having spent 10 years as the United States Attorney here in the state and 30 years in and out of law enforcement, you'd be surprised sometimes at how just amazingly resourceful federal, state, local, tribal law enforcement are and pursuing any and all avenues based on the evidence that they're finding as they go along. When I mentioned the scant presence on social media, I thought I was the only person in America that never had a Facebook account. He just doesn't have that we can see now. Doesn't mean there never was. No, you never know. We're going back and looking around for others. But we're a week into this, and it continues.
Maybe I missed this, Attorney General, but how far back does the timeline go when he was searching out different methods of mayhem, and how long back does the acquiring of weapons go?
About the weapons, Mike?
How far back, when did he start compiling the weapons? And how far back did the timeline go of searching? How long was he preparing to do something?
Okay. The searches I know go back a few years. Chief Deputy Ness was just looking at it again on the way over here. Do you remember the furthest year back on the searches? Okay. Yeah, I think you heard her. Preliminarily, the furthest back that we have is 2018 that we see on those searches. But again, do we find more? I don't know. And as for the firearms, to our knowledge, what we've been informed by our federal partners, they're all purchased lawfully. And I don't know if the U.S. Attorney has information along those lines that you can share for how far that goes back, but we have reason to conclude that it goes back a little ways.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the ATF has not concluded their investigation on that. You can be assured they're looking into whether any component parts of these guns were illegally provided or things of that nature, but it's ongoing, Mike.
And then do we know why he stopped at the incident to harm the police officers? Is there evidence in the search of his computer that he had something against police officers, or what do we know there?
That's a good question. To the first part, we don't know, and I think it was just happenstance. As I said, how could he possibly anyone know that there was a crash on 25th, and he happened to just be proceeding down that way and had been for quite some while. We've got video of him being on 25th quite a ways south. So he just happened upon that. But his intention, we've described where we get to that, and he gets to the scene and he starts casing it out in the way that we described. And forgive me, Mike, I know there's a second part to that. You said a second part to that. Beyond
I said, is there evidence in his search of a dislike or hatred of police officers?
Still preliminary. We don't yet have anything. There's not like some screed against the police. There's the federal authorities are going through they need to use some language experts, foreign language experts to go through a couple of items around there. Maybe we'll see something, but nothing online so far, nothing on the phone so far, nothing that we can gather from the community. We've talked to some family members. No, nothing along those lines yet. Not foreclosed at all.
And one more. You said that in the propane tanks there was explosive materials, so was there not propane in them, and were they filled with something else? Sorry, thank you.
Another good question, Mike. Thanks. I didn't mention that in my remarks. Should have. The bomb squad seized those items, and they have detonated those items. And it was quite dramatic. I mean, anyone who's familiar with substances like tannerite, which are ignited by a high-power rifle, this is a full canister full of it. One is full and one is half. They've been detonated. I've reviewed that evidence, the video evidence and everything else of it, quite dramatic explosions. And of course they disintegrate the metal encasement of the tank. So that was easily detonated explosive device. And he had the means by which to blow it up anytime he wanted to. And so that remains an area, obviously, of interest in tracking down the where, when, why, and the how isn't very complicated, like I said.
What can you tell us about Bearcat's history prior to coming to the U.S. in 2012? As a state law enforcement official, I don't have access to the information about that, and I don't know that that's something the U.S. Attorney can speak to. I know as having been the U.S. Attorney, I know U.S. Attorneys don't like being spoken for, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and not to sound like a broken record, but that's part of the investigation.
To that point then, has anyone spoken to his family, and are they in the United States? And if you have, did he make any comments to them about these events?
We have spoken with, he has some family in the United States. I'll leave it at that. They do not live in the area. They're outside of the region. They have been spoken to. It doesn't sound like a particularly close communication pattern between them, and no information that I can give to you right now, not because I'm holding it back, just nothing to share along those lines at this point. But those communications will continue as part of the investigation.
Can you say at all, perhaps a message to the Muslim community here? Because there is some concern and worry that just given the name, that there may be some sort of tie. And while a motive is unclear, or you have said it doesn't seem he intended to be tied to any particular group, again, there is some concern.
I don't have the perfect thing to say along those lines, except to caution people about that. I mean, we would be sharing if we had something particularized. I think I made a comment before that probably speaks to that better than anything else. At this point in the investigation, I find his Muslim faith no more notable than my Lutheran faith. We have established and been told about and seen no ties between him and the Muslim community here, and saw nothing in the online search to this point. You know, we've all read about people being radicalized, all of those things. And perhaps people can forgive the impulse or whatever, I don't know, the impulse to wonder. But if and when that becomes part of this, that will be shared. But we're sharing with you now what we know and what we've seen. And I stand by my early comment repeated right now.
Question for Drew first, and then Mac. Were there any Muslim or Islamic faith-related materials recovered at the suspect's home?
Recovered from his home?
Yeah. Were there any? I mean, is there a Quran? Is there Muslim? Yep. You know, it sounds like you're assuming he was of the Muslim faith and saying it's not necessarily related to the crime. And some in the Muslim community are saying just because his name's Muhammad doesn't mean he's Muslim. I'm asking if there's anything that would lead you to believe.
Yeah, and just because someone has a Bible doesn't make them a Christian either. So, but I can answer your question: is that there was a Quran found at his house? But
all right, and then the other question for you is co-conspirators. You know, some people are surmising with that amount of guns, you know, you can only shoot one gun at a time. So if their plan was to go to a downtown street fair or some other populated event, you know, you couldn't possibly use all those weapons yourselves anyway. I mean, is there still a possibility there was a co-conspirator?
There's no way for us to foreclose that there's a co-conspirator. We can tell you that we're out here talking about it a week later because at this point, we don't believe there to be a present concern of others. But our investigation has not foreclosed that, and I don't. I've learned a little bit in 30 years of this. You don't foreclose things that can materialize in an investigation. So that's what we're doing. And as for, you know, arming himself to the teeth, as they say, like that, I mean, he had 3 high-power rifles in that vehicle, and he selected the one that gave him the best opportunity to put out the most rounds in the mayhem that he wanted to create and the murderous intent that he had. The other rounds, 1,800 rounds, well, he got through 30 rounds out of that weapon like that. He got through that, actually 40, we think 40, 41 rounds out of that weapon. And that's when it gets incapacitated by Officer Robinson, leaving 20 more in it. He wasn't in a position to get back into that vehicle, but you can put a lot of rounds through one of those weapons in a hurry. So it raises the question, but it doesn't answer the question that there had to be more conspirators because he had more guns. He was a person who had amassed quite an array and perhaps to give himself more flexibility depending on what it was he was intending on doing, because he was searching a lot of different events. And our belief that day we've already stated. And he selected the weapon in accord with what his intentions were that day and developed that moment when he saw the police officers cased it out for a while and waited. And in fact, more officers did show up.
Mac, next question for you, actually two-part question. One, Drew mentioned earlier something about a Guardian report. Is there a federal Guardian report that would be like some kind of a list that he would have been on? What is that?
Well, you heard the Attorney General's comment, Scott. I'm going to refrain from commenting further beyond what I've already said earlier. That'll all bear out in time, but for now, I'm going to defer to the ongoing investigation.
But you can't tell me whether there's a Guardian report or not?
I think you heard the Attorney General's comment, Scott.
Okay, so there is. Last question then for you, Mac. Are there any plans, or is there even a means to do, an investigation that goes back to his refugee application? I know that there's investigations that are done before these people are accepted for refugee status. Is that information still readily available as far as the investigation?
I'm going to answer that a little bit indirectly. I have full faith that the FBI, working in conjunction with the ATF and our partners at BCI at the state level, are going to conduct a completely thorough investigation. That investigation is going on right now. It's being conducted aggressively and intensely, and we trust them to follow all appropriate leads.
So was this an act of terrorism? Was there some orchestration behind it, beyond the terror that was offered? And my question would pertain to how quickly the federal warrant came. And Mac, I'm curious if the Department of Homeland Security is part of this.
A couple of questions in a row there, Joel. I'll do my best to answer them. With regard to motive, if we had clear evidence of that, we would share it. We would absolutely share it. The state of affairs is that the investigation is ongoing. ATF, FBI, BCI, they will all be looking into the issue of motive. What was the second part of the question? How fast
Is
was
the
it
Department of Homeland Security involved in your investigation?
I remember the second question, that was the third one.
Well, the second question is, when you look at this, the federal warrant came right away. That's not always so easy.
Well, it is easy when you have dedicated people like our partners in the FBI and the talented career assistant United States attorneys and support staff in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Okay. We wouldn't think to do otherwise. That was
one more. Did the murderer work out of Hawley, Minnesota? And if he did work out of Hawley, Minnesota, why can't we have a more clear picture? Why can't there be a more picture, or a picture that shows him more clearly if, in fact, Mr. Attorney General, your investigation has shown that and there was the opportunity, for example, for him to be on a website?
In addition to us going through and trying to find a photograph the other day, I got the message from you about the provision that you believed, or some believe might supersede those DOT provisions, and we looked into that. I'm not sure that we agree. But I do want to get it out, though. I mean, in fact, if we can get it out today, we want to. A higher resolution picture would be better. You can't live in a community like this and not have some people have some familiarity with you. So we're going to do that. And I would, in maybe the next couple of hours, we can to get that out. Mac has an excuse. He works for somebody. I guess I don't. I'm not sure. So we're gonna probably move ahead and be able to get that out. It's something that Mac and I have discussed a bit here in the last days, and obviously just bear with us for maybe for another couple of hours. We want to get this one out now, but that's what we've got right now.
Did he work out of Hawley, Minnesota?
I don't have anything for you on that. I don't have anything to say for you on that. We've had some contacts with different businesses that he's worked at over recent years, and those are ongoing discussions, and I just don't want to alert people to that, and that can obstruct an investigation pretty quickly when people start getting other people coming to them, and it can undermine our efforts, so we don't want to do that.
Is there any evidence that points towards Bearcat intentionally creating a diversion?
That's a really good question. Say intentionally creating a diversion. It's just such a common technique for people who want to engage in a mass casualty event, which we do think is very well established. We think it's apparent even before we get to the computer, frankly, based on the armaments that he had. Then when you get into the searches, you realize it's a topic of interest to him, and not because he wanted to be a first responder. He was looking at events out there, sizing them up all around. He had interest in researching that all around, not just in the region at all. We haven't had one for him to read. So, but to know it with certainty, like I know the names of my 3 children, no. Pretty common in law enforcement. You can't climb inside their brains, and people don't, write it all down and out. But it's a good question, and I think all evidence points in a direction in that regard, and it's a very common technique. Based on the search from the computer, how he was armed, where he was headed, and he sees this event that tends to distract him and give him an opportunity to do something to begin the process of carrying out what he wanted to ultimately carry out. I said it before, the horrible winds of fate sometimes, but those events fell into place and fell into his path.
Can someone just clarify what exactly, in general, a Guardian report is?
I got to tell you, I literally had never heard the phrase before until last Friday night. It wasn't a phrase with which I was familiar. We're all familiar with the terrorist watch list, and I don't know when they came up with the reporting system that led to Guardian reports. I have literally never heard it referenced in light of an investigation until this instance, and still have not been provided a copy of the Guardian report in this case.
The fact that he has is there anything you wanted to add, Matt? Can you provide any insight now that you're the U.S. attorney?
I think that's pretty well covered. Essentially, it's a way for the public to engage local law enforcement and notify them about things of concern.
So somebody from the public, could that have been when the fire department responded to the fire at his home, that they would have maybe forwarded some report onto law enforcement that they saw some concerning items?
Yeah, there's a lot of information on our part up here, so I just ask you to not conflate the two. The fire incident had nothing to do with the Guardian report. Totally separate. Totally separate. I maybe answered in the same way because it was at the same time, because I was asked the question by someone, generally law enforcement contacts. And
okay.
To be clear on all of these, we're answering you the best that we can, both responsibly and then also what we know at this point. Don't come back to me in 2 weeks and say, Drew, you didn't tell us that we had that information. We're taking the step of moving forward here. This is another area Mac and I have been, you talk about no daylight, just seeing recognizing that this is an important thing to do. The public has very understandable concern and love and outpouring, of course, for law enforcement and for Carly, but also about what's being done in response to it. So that's why we're doing this, taking this extraordinary step. But then we've got constraints on what we can share with you.
The fact that you can't find pictures or social media presence, does that just kind of show how far under the radar he's been operating in Fargo? And does that add to this investigation why someone would be like that?
I mean, that speaks to it. I mean, we tell our kids all the time, right? And everyone, once it's out there, and that's right. So it's a little out of the ordinary. There's nothing out there. When I say nothing, but I mean, there's been some things people have provided a video of saying this, they think this is him. Can you verify this is him? I can't verify that that's him. Not because I'm being coy. I look at it and I don't know. We all change with weight gain, weight loss. We don't know on those matters. We may know in a few weeks. We may have some of those answers. Right now, you've got the image that we've got that with the resolution that we've got. To Joel's question, both a day or two ago and now, we're going to try to get that DOT picture out. Who thought, right? I mean, we've all got our driver's license. We're showing it to everybody, and there's all sorts of legal hurdles, and we'll try to move that out too.
And just one last question here. You said it appeared on his internet searches he lost the will. Can you elaborate?
No.
Was he planning something years ago? Or what did you mean by those comments?
No, I just meant that it wasn't a steady stream of like every other day he's going online and finding it. It seemed like he went along the lines of looking, there was a little more intense search period, and then it abated for a while. And then he rejoined the effort to gain knowledge about mass casualty events and so forth. That's all. It's just a reading of the tea leaves that are provided by the search history.
Drew, you and Mac touched a little bit on the forensics. It's kind of a detailed phone question, but was he fairly active in texting and calling this past month? I mean, did he have a lot of contacts that he was in communication with days prior?
I've said pretty much everything I'm going to say about that at this point, other than to just say with the information that we have right now, I would characterize it as not very active.
Okay, and then Mac, you said the forensics being done on writings and language. A lot of people talk about manifestos in cases like this. It doesn't sound like there was one, but is there writing you guys are examining, stuff that he had maybe written online or just emails, what have you?
Yeah, that's all part of the ongoing investigation.
Hi, Peter Teff, JusticeReport.news. You had spoken about a motive. I just was wondering if a possible motive was anti-white hate crimes, if that's being explored as a possible motive. And then also you spoke to the Muslim and the police community in town. Do you have anything to say to the white community who lost 4 last weekend? Thank you.
I don't think the white community lost 4 police officers were assaulted last week. And I don't think law enforcement, anyone that I know, views it that way. 4 officers were out at the scene. 1 was murdered. 2 were grievously injured and put in peril of death. Member of the public, same. I haven't heard anyone until this moment characterize it that way, so I don't have anything to add for that. I'm gonna leave it there.
It was said that he was putting the finishing touches on his shooting skills. Can you say where he was doing this at?
I can, but I won't.
Okay, and then also was said that the bomb dog hit on the apartment. Was this residue or was it actual explosives?
I mentioned the hand grenade parts. Again, that's colloquial. I'm using my words for it. Hand grenade parts, components of hand grenades. You saw the photograph of the one that he had constructed, which was operable, and which he had with him that day, and which was tucked into the vest that he had. As bomb sniffing dogs, they'll hit on gunpowder. There was an array of live rounds in the apartment, so that's what that is. I mean, they're there. They hit on that, and that gives you an additional level of caution, which was then exercised by federal authorities. I had a BCI agent out there also to retrieve the forensics when they got them. They felt it was inevitable they'll find something there, and they did, and I described that. So.
Hi, just to kind of go off of the finishing touches, are you able to tell us if he had any like military training, any formal gun training at all?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add at this point along those lines.
Okay, yeah. And then I know you said he kind of came upon the accident on kind of happenstance. Do you know if he had any sort of police scanner or any other kind of things he'd be able to, I guess, kind of track whereabouts of law enforcement?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. Something we were on the lookout for. And to this point, we've retrieved no detection devices along the line that you described.
What's the gunman's date of birth?
I've got that. Just not right in front of me. I believe he's 37 years old. Does anyone have his date of birth? Born in '89. We'll get that to you. Sorry, I don't have that written down up here.
Hi, you said he became a citizen in 2019. Do you know what exact year he came to Fargo and from what city he came from?
We do not have anything along those lines for you.
So my question is a little in regard to the firearms that he possessed. You said he worked kind of odd little jobs here and there for multiple businesses. His collection was rather large. Is this something we think, he was able to amass in a short amount of time, or was this kind of a spread out collection of firearms and ammo, and kind of where do you think those funds came from?
Logical question. It's not one I'm going to address right now. We will eventually. The idea of guns aren't inexpensive, obviously. And the time period within which you purchase them and how many different places you go, all of that is of interest, of course. And it's being looked into, but it's not something I'm going to share right now.
Just a question, rather than an event of opportunity, it became apparent that we heard over the radio commentaries that he was seen on Broadway, maybe looking it over, seeing where there might have been a place of opportunity. Is there any truth to that?
I don't have any information on that, and no information along that line has been made available to me.
Was he, through the investigation, speaking to neighbors at the apartment that he lived in? Was he known to any of them? Any relationship, acquaintanceship with any of them? Did we learn any valuable information from that?
All being evaluated from the very earliest hours of this, and I'm going to leave it at that. I actually that night, I mean, things were moving so rapidly. I got a call from a reporter, and I appreciated that, to say there are people here that are talking about this out here, and we had law enforcement on scene, and we, it's happening rapidly. Appreciated that call. It was the responsible thing to do for sure, and all of that in the hours and days and continuing on. Yes.
There were a number of officers at the street fair in downtown Fargo at around the time the call came through. When the call came through and people started learning what was going on, they went to respond to it, leaving the street fair with a number of privately hired armed security forces. God forbid, should something like this ever happen again, would there be plans in place to maybe leave officers at major community events like this when something like this happens?
I don't know if the chief wants to address that today or a different time, but.
Yeah, sure. Good question, Matt. As I said earlier, that is something we're evaluating. Yeah, I think the natural tendency when we've got a situation like this is for, as Zach even said, send everyone, but certainly that's something that we have to look at from a safety perspective as well, and make sure that something like that doesn't happen. But yes, that's being looked at, and go from there.
Okay. And question regarding the shooter, was he, for whomever is able to answer it, was he studying to be an EMT or anything of the sort as part of his plot?
I don't have any information about that. I've not heard that. We continue to look into any and all means of support and expertise that he has, financial and otherwise, and continue to look at that. But I had not heard that. No.
Chief, a couple of years ago, or when you first started, there were a couple of shootings in town, and I said, "How do we get a grip on this?" And you said, "By getting rid of the illegal guns." Today we learned that all these guns are legally obtained. And I'm sure that there's a few people in the cable audience that are watching and saying, "That's not an arsenal. I have more in my basement." How do we, were there any kind of red flags that pop up when somebody amasses that many cartridges, that much ammunition? I guess, how do we wrap our heads around this by saying, was there a red flag?
Sure. Well, there are no legal parameters that I'm aware of that are create any alerts when someone buys a certain amount of ammunition or a certain amount of firearms, as long as they're legally purchased. They go through the background check, et cetera. So, yeah, I think that's all I could say on that.
Okay, I apologize if this is kind of the same question because I have an earpiece in my ear, but I was wondering, with the background checks for these purchased weapons, were there any red flags that may have gone unignored, that may have gone ignored by where those guns were purchased?
That's certainly something that is within the jurisdiction of ATF, but which again is continuing to aggressively and thoroughly look into this.
Mr. Wrigley, do you feel that binary triggers should be banned in North Dakota? And if so, would you offer any legislation in the upcoming session to ban those triggers?
Yeah, forgive my naivete on this topic. I learned of this mechanism first time in my life, meeting with my BCI agents in the wake of these events last Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I have done a little searching, found no meaningful purpose. I can't find one for it. You can't uninvent the wheel, as they say. It exists. It is purposeless. I may have just made up a word, but you know what I mean? I can't see like what it would do. It's, again, just walking through it. A round is fired, round is fired, round is fired, round is fired. And some of my agents were, commenting to me that if you get pretty good at that, and you get the rhythm to that, you've made your weapon into a fully operable machine gun. It's an automatic fire weapon. Now people say, no, it's not. You still have to pull it. And you're like, it's the functional equivalent of it. And we've outlawed that for decades. I don't know. That is a broader discussion down the road. I bring up the topic of it though, because it's at least bears mentioning. And I'll wait for the Twitter assault on that one, but I'll take it. Maybe someone can tell me what they think the purpose is of that. There's no way to undo it. This person chose to employ that tactic. He purchased this and he utilized it. At the end of the day, it's the hate in his heart. It's the drive to kill. It's the desire for mayhem. It's his quest to engage in and carry out a mass casualty event. I'm as speechless as you.
Yeah, last question. Has anyone from the public ever reported Bearcat for being concerns about being a terrorist or any crimes related to that?
I'm not aware of that, but I'm gonna say that I haven't heard anything along those lines. It doesn't mean that has never happened. Nothing's been brought to my attention along those lines. But anything of that nature, of course, is going to be. I don't want you to take from that, say it doesn't exist. We're a week into the investigation. We've had BCI agents, Sheriff's Department, Police Department, every federal agency, neighboring law enforcement, state, local, working on this, but it's a week still in, and we'll see where that goes. The U.S. Attorney mentioned that up ahead, we're going to come back out and share what we continue to see in this. It's a moment of public interest and not just curiosity. It's important interest, and so we'll share that information as we get going up ahead. I have every reason to trust and believe that the federal law enforcement authorities involved in this are being candid with us and forthright about what they know. I don't have a reason to think otherwise, and that's how we're proceeding. I think we're kind of getting to the point here where we'll wrap it up, but if there's a couple more.
Just curious, given his lack of a helmet, a bulletproof vest, other defensive items, did he expect to survive this or not? Just curious what his intent was for his own life or safety.
I have one indication that to me indicates that he did, or that he hoped to. A means by which he would check to see if anyone had been to his apartment in his absence. He had a couple of different techniques that he employed in that regard, and they were employed in this instance. I'm not going to tell you what they are at this point. I might later, will later. Don't say might, I will. Those are the only indicators I have along those lines.
And I'm wondering if what happened here
is part of a larger federal investigation. I believe Chief Zibolski said on Saturday he had spoken to Merrick Garland, the FBI director, as well. And I know we have FBI, ATF here. Is Washington, is the focus here, are the feds in Washington, is Homeland Security, any of those agencies directly involved as part of a larger investigation?
I'm going to give it to the chief quickly, but I'm going to answer one part, having been both a federal and state law enforcement official. I can tell you that it's important people remember not every occurrence is there even jurisdiction in the federal side. I had people come to me all the time when I was U.S. Attorney in Macwell too. Some serious thing happened, they'd say, well, that's got to go federal. And you're like, well, there's no jurisdiction for it. I mean, it's specific jurisdiction granted by law. But you don't know that going in. So we appreciate, Mac and I were on the phone very quickly. I mean, we appreciate that we would be working hand in glove, not knowing where the investigation is going to go. Appreciate that the Attorney General of the United States contacted in too. But that doesn't indicate that there's going to be federal jurisdiction or that they have information that there is. I not to speak for the Attorney General of the United States, but it's a arm out to help, right? To say we want to be there with you, and we'll see where the investigation goes, and then you make those avenue choices, whether you go state or federal. If there is a prosecution, in this instance, we are where we are. But Chief, I don't know if you have something to that, but I did want to address that misperception that's out there that people think if it's something really serious, the feds do it, and if it's not, well, I mean, there's not a general homicide provision, for instance. There's not a general homicide provision in federal law. There's one for if you are on a Native American reservation. Major crimes, I could bore you for a long time on this. But no, we see that as very much an offer to let's assist while we see where this is going. And, it's worked, I think, the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney rather, and I would describe it exactly the same way. It's been seamless and working together, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, just to clarify those comments, Attorney General Garland, just as FBI Director Christopher Wray and others have called me specifically to offer condolences and support, and so no discussions relative to investigations. We have no knowledge of any other additional or ongoing federal investigation related to this. And I concur with the Attorney General that we have trust in our federal partners here that we're working with. They need a little more time to work through their investigation, and I think we all kind of await those results.
Mr. Attorney General, one last question. When this has happened all across the nation, law enforcement has referred to these as they are, which is assault weapons, assault rifles. You keep making reference to it as a .223. My .270 that I hunt deer with is a long rifle. Why not refer to these, because they are set up as ARs, the same way law enforcement across the country does, which is as an AR?
I don't know. Honestly, it's like can you hear me okay? It's a term of art to me. I mean, I own an AR. Lots of people own it. It's like the most popular firearm sold in America. I'm not, it goes without saying. I use it it's the smallest caliber you can use for deer hunting. I use mine for deer hunting from time to time. I've never hit a deer with it, interestingly enough. But that's why I'm not trying to be cute about it. I'm referring to it by the caliber. The other one, the other caliber is not as widely known, so I did refer to it as an AK. Same thing, like this wasn't, for instance, an AR. It wasn't an AR-15. It was an AM, I think, 15, one of them that I was looking at. It's like calling every one of these, the channel wrenches, every one of them a crescent wrench. Drives some people crazy. They're not all crescent wrenches. And so that's what they are. We're not making any, show of not letting you know what it is. People can call it what they want. They too often get used for horrific purpose. But I've been a prosecutor a long time. I also have a Colt 380 semi-automatic that I, from time to time, will carry, and those get used for a lot of heinous crimes too. That's the only point about it. And I don't hear you making a political point about that. I'm assuring you that I'm not trying to hide the fact of what the weapon that it is. It is an AR style weapon, and then also the other one that we pointed out is an AK style weapon, and I'm comfortable saying that too. It just seemed imprecise otherwise.
This is going to be our last media question.
Kind of a two-parter. The first one, can you at least kind of maybe generalize how he was getting the explosives and guns and ammo, whether it was through places of employment, through the mail, purchases at various gun shops across the region? And I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll follow up with a very simple question.
I can't. Not because I won't. We're still looking into those matters. To this point, early on, we believed it to be so. It's remained so now. In one word, legally.
And the investigation, obviously, it appears to be very complex. Any rough timeline, how long it will take to put this full puzzle together? I realize things will pop up, but any idea? Are we talking months or even more than a year?
No, I'm not gonna characterize that. We don't know. Tomorrow we could find out about some connection to somebody in a neighboring state or region or county or apartment building, and our commitment to you is to pursue that to the nth degree, to the end of the earth, whatever we can find, if anything. But I'll caution you, it might be nothing. There are lone wolves. That is a real concept, and what we perceive right now may remain so. It may change as well, but. I don't have any way to do that. Again, referencing back to my 10 years as United States Attorney, I think people thought every time Drew walks out on the steps and announces an indictment or a case or something that's going on, I bet they've been working on this for weeks. Well, try months, years sometimes. There's one case going on. Someone told me the other day, I bet nothing's going to happen, right? Because there's been nobody charged. It's been almost, and then they gave the time period. All I can do is smile at them. It's like these go on. They are painstaking. They go on and on and on. And it's not because federal law enforcement isn't eager to wrap the matters up, but they sometimes involve multiple jurisdictions and on and on and on. If you'd watched the work of the BCI, who I've been working with so closely across many, many years, but now the last couple of days, spend so much time down there, I describe them as, it's like an anthill. It's like self-organizing anthill. They're going all over. Everybody's got to-do lists. They get back together. It's incredible. The public, I can feel very good about the fact that your men and women in uniform. I see Jesse John, our sheriff, our great sheriff is here. So many others that are around the room. Hey, these people work hard. And when they come out with the fruits of their investigations, there's a lot to that. There's a lot behind that. You're seeing the tip of the iceberg. So I don't have a meaningful way to give you how long this is going to play out, because we're not going to run out of energy for pursuing every single lead that merits further attention. The time could come where we feel like this has reached its conclusion. We're comfortable that we're at the end of this. We don't have other avenues to go down with regard to this horrible, horrific incident. But we're not there yet. And when we get there, we'll be letting you know that it's run its course, and we're there to share the final thoughts we have on the investigations. Okay, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
And with that wraps up an exhaustive press conference, about an hour and 45 minutes long, that covered a variety of topics and gave us a lot of information and a lot of detail. We will try to bring you some of the high points. If you joined us at any point after the press conference started and did not hear it all, obviously we can't give you everything that was said or we'd be here for a long time. But some of the high points that we heard today in a press conference that gave a lot of opportunity for questions to be answered. We're very thankful for that as a news organization, to Drew Wrigley, Max Schneider, Chief Zibolski, and others. We got a very specific timeline today. Fargo Fire was first to respond at 2:48 to the fender bender on 25th Street. 1 minute later, Fargo PD arrived. It was Dotis and Hawes, not Officer Willeen, who ended up dying in the incident, but it was Dotis and Hawes first on the scene. And then it was 14 minutes later when Robinson, Zach Robbins, who ended up taking out the gunman, and Jake Willeen arrived. So it was 14 minutes. And they went into a lot of detail about Bearcat driving around the area, waiting, they believe, for additional law enforcement to arrive. Bearcat has spray painted the windows of his vehicle, trying to tint them so nobody could see inside what he had, which was multiple tanks of gasoline, propane tanks that did not have propane in them, another sort of explosive fluid of some sort. And so nobody could see inside. And basically, it was a typical fender bender, people milling around. and vehicles being moved off the street. And during that process of that, there were 3 police officers walking up to one of the vehicles, the vehicle that got run into, and that is when Bearcat began shooting. Robinson remained in the street because he thought someone might hit the fire truck that was leaving. There is body cam video. It's not being released here at this time, but it will. The Bearcat ended up firing. He had 60 rounds available to him and was able to squeeze off a number of rounds because of a binary trigger, an aftermarket legal adaptation. But in Drew Wrigley's terms, everything you hit twice because you have the binary trigger. Tom Tucker is in with me, senior reporter here from our newsroom. And Tom, I thought that was an interesting piece. I'd not heard about binary triggers before, but basically allows a bullet to be released on the trigger and then the relax off the trigger, and then you can fire twice. So in Drew Wrigley's words later on, he said it effectively turns a semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic because of the number of rounds you can get off.
Yeah, Steve, I'm not a gun expert, and I'm not surprised that there exist devices that are capable of enhancing this type of functionality, this binary trigger. The Attorney General was asked by one of the members of the media about this particular device and whether or not he thought it would be appropriate to enact legislation aimed at removing this lawful device from the market. And he didn't give a clear indication one way or the other in terms of whether or not he thought that type of legislation was necessary. But he did say that he saw this particular device as useless or purposeless, I think was one of the words he used.
Yeah, purposeless was his
to
term,
describe
yes.
that. But for me, sitting here now for some time here this morning and into this afternoon watching this press conference, I think the thing that really stuck out to me was that both Attorney General Wrigley and U.S. Attorney Max Schneider both said that there is no clear indication of motive in this incident.
Yes, 100% right. I think this was the biggest thing. We don't know why this happened. And I think, there were additional details that were given about things that had happened that we know about, but there is no real yet clue as to why he did what he did. Wrigley continued his summary, basically saying that the officers, there were three officers that were hit basically very quickly. Wallin was the first to get hit, but all 3 were hit very quickly. None had a chance to turn, crouch, grab a weapon, protect themselves. In his words, they drop. Robinson immediately engages, not knowing what he's faced with ammo and weapons, doesn't know if it's a single shooter, doesn't know if it's multiple shooters. At that point, you just didn't know. Bearcat jumps out of the vehicle, uses the vehicle as a shield from about 75 feet. Carly, the woman from Boston who recently moved to the community, who we found out because of how they described the vehicle, she was the one that ran into the other vehicle that was hit in this fender bender. She tries to run behind a tree, goes a couple of steps and goes down immediately because Bearcat shoots her. Lower body injuries, I think hip and knee is what I heard, significant, but seems like she's doing well. In that instance, Robinson, trying to aim and take out the gunman, hits the long rifle, aiming for center mass, but hits Bearcat in the rifle. Bearcat is injured at that time, which we didn't know until today. Now Robinson approaches not knowing if there's other gunmen or if it's, again, just a single perpetrator here. 16 times tells Bearcat to raise his hands. Bearcat tries to get around in the handgun, and Robinson moves in and fires multiple rounds to basically neutralize the threat. Drew Wrigley said, amazing restraint, trying to somehow get this situation resolved without additional loss of life. At 3:06 p.m., so this would be the vehicle, the fender bender happened just right around 2:45. Fargo Fire was on scene at 2:48. So this was a fairly long amount of time. This was a 20-25 minute scenario top to bottom. Bearcat remained alive but in serious distress, and then other officers started to arrive. Bearcat had planned other attacks. They got search warrants for the vehicle and the apartment. found all that stuff that we talked about in the vehicle. In the residence, there were more guns and more ammunition. They said no social media presence, not much interaction with others, and they said multiple times, we do not see an additional threat emanating from this incident. They do not believe that there are others that he's in cahoots with, that there's going to be others at different times. They say we don't see that at this time. They talked about the search of his computer and the records, and the last search that he made on July 13th was a story about thousands enjoying the first day of the Fargo Street Fair. They said they do not see a particularized hate toward one person. This was not targeted to law enforcement or a certain group. It does not appear to be religiously motivated. Wrigley said that the officers being there and that particular incidents just were the winds of fate. And there could have been much worse. Max Schneider, U.S. Attorney District of North Dakota, didn't say a whole lot today, but basically just commented on his organization's involvement there and that law enforcement's trying to find a motive. There is none yet, but he said three things. There's no reason to believe the public's in further danger. If we had any clue on motive, we would share it. We don't, and we will continue to share what we can when we can.
Yeah, Steve, I agree with your pointing out there in terms of what we heard from Max Schneider. I thought those were the three most important things. No apparent motive, and we'll share what we can when we can, and that this investigation is ongoing. Going back just very briefly here to Carly Coswick, you brought her up here. The good news with her is, as you indicated, she's in good spirits. She was moved out of ICU a couple of days ago. She is very seriously injured and has a serious medical road ahead, as the Attorney General described it. Going back to the internet searches a little bit as well, I thought this was particularly compelling as well. We were told these internet searches are dated back to 2018 is when they began. And some of the terms that we are told were searched by Barakat include searches related to, quote, explosive ammo, kill fast, incendiary rounds, mass shooting events, how to, going through events around the country, studying mass shooting events, getting ideas, performing research, apparently to determine how he could best carry out his attack. And then, as you also referenced, the last search that they found on that computer at 10:30 p.m. the night of July 13th was an article titled "Thousands Enjoy Downtown Fargo Street Fair."
Yeah, and a big part of why they believe that certainly could have been his destination. In the Q&A, there was a comment about that I'll get to in just a moment, but I want to continue my TikTok here just to make sure we get everything important out and I don't skip around too much. Fargo Mayor Tim Mahoney then addressed the group and said, David Zibolski, in addition to talking about this incident, said there was good news that yesterday both officers Dotis and Hawes were able to stand up out of their beds. He called it miraculous. He said they have a significant road to recovery, but not insurmountable. This individual is dead set on killing as many as possible, and we will be looking at ways to protect larger events where we can. So I did want to make sure I got that in on Zibolski too. Tim Mahoney, Fargo mayor, reminded people of the public service next Wednesday at 1 o'clock and encouraged the public, as many as could, to attend that, and that they appreciate all the support for law enforcement there. Drew Wrigley then made a comment that if the public has information about Mohammed Barakat, maybe an encounter they had, that they are definitely looking for the public's help on this, and gave out the phone number 701-328-5500, 328-5500. Then we had a Q&A period. The questions came up on a myriad of things, and we won't go through all of them, but a few of them that I thought was interesting. He did confirm that Barakat came to the United States on asylum in 2012, became a citizen in 2019, worked a number of odd jobs, and then recently kind of regained interest in mass casualty events, looking at firepower and bullets and how injuries affect people, and then amassing weapons and ammunition and loading into the car. He was looking for big events in the region, and he was either taking a right or a left at Main Avenue. This is something, Tom, I think maybe is worthy of a little bit of discussion. Drew Wrigley said in the press conference on Wednesday that it would have been 4 or 5 minutes to downtown, as if they said that's where he was going. I heard him today be a little less directive that way in saying, well, you had the street fair to the right, you had the Red River Valley Fair to the left. So I didn't hear anything today other than the note about the last event he searched online was about the street fair, which could be a coincidence. So it sounds like I think they're still keeping the possibility open that he could have begun wherever, but certainly was looking to go to one of those two events. So I didn't hear him today say, we know for a fact he was going downtown to the street fair, but certainly a reasonable possibility.
Oh, I agree with you, Steve. It's not entirely clear, right, where he was going to go to next. But sure, the street fair is a possibility. The Red River Fair was taking place at that time as well, with thousands of people there also. Just a couple other notes, and forgive me if I'm kind of taking a little bit of a sidetrack here
Not at all.
the direction you were going. A couple other interesting things that I thought came up during the Q&A period. Had to do with the fact that we were told that Barakat does have family in the United States, not inside the area, somewhere outside the region. The Attorney General would not get specific on that for us. And he did indicate that Barakat's family members had been spoken to, but also indicated that his perception was that Barakat was not especially close to his family. The question was also asked, what do we know about Barakat's history in Syria prior to 2012? The Attorney General didn't have anything specific on that particular issue. Another question that was asked specifically to Max Schneider, the U.S. attorney, was the question that was asked on Wednesday as well. Is the government, will the feds describe this or label this or call this an act of terrorism? And if I heard and saw correctly, my perception is that Max Schneider was non-committal on that as well. And, for some people, this could be a matter of semantics, right?
A distinction without a difference.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what we call it. The end result was terror. The community clearly was terrorized here.
100% right. Yeah, other notes from the Q&A session. Again, we're trying to give you a quick summary of what you heard in case you didn't get to hear the whole thing. He was practicing his shooting technique and skills in the last hours before the assault. They didn't specify much more than that, but he was apparently target shooting that morning. Max Schneider did not want to answer questions, declined to answer any questions, or did not get anything regarding a terrorist watch list, and we'll refer back to that in a minute. He had a couple of incidents where there was contact with the fire department. He had a cooking fire in his place, but there was something that was mentioned called a federal Guardian report. He wasn't on any kind of terror watch list, but there is something called a Guardian report that basically put him on some sort of watch, but not a threat of violence. And it sounded more incidental than anything. I think the reporters on scene asked, and rightfully so, tell us what this is. Is this something that matters? And they seemed to sort of downplay that this was anything significant. It may be more just a matter of process that someone called to say, hey, I heard this guy maybe asking for help on something else, but it didn't sound like anything that would cause anyone to be suspicious of him. Tom, did you come away with a different impression of that?
No, I think your assessment is pretty accurate and consistent with what I understood to be communicated there at that particular point, Steve. I wish I had something more specific for you on that right now, but I don't. Forgive me, during your last couple of moments there, I was doing a little bit of research here on my phone, looking up one item that the Attorney General mentioned that was in these tanks in the car, and I think the word he used was tannerite. Or something to that effect.
It was something like that, yeah, yes. I didn't catch that note.
And apparently that's, some type of explosive material. Now, I think he said there was a canister full of tannerite and another that was about half full
yes.
of tannerite, and then maybe a gas container as well. But apparently this tannerite is highly explosive. The Attorney General did tell us that after these items were seized and recovered, that they were essentially detonated. And that the Attorney General indicated he saw a video of this detonation and suggested that this type of explosive is highly dangerous and has the capacity to inflict serious harm and damage.
Yeah, you said that the impact or the detonation was dramatic, I believe was it. And he did say that he had the means to detonate that. Mm-hmm. So whatever he had in those tanks, he had a way to detonate that. Could just be a simple gunshot to a certain area. Don't know about that. A number of questions came up on religious motives. It was noted that he had a copy of the Quran in his apartment, but no ties to the Muslim community here in this community. And Wrigley said it doesn't appear to matter at all. He said a couple of times it's no more notable here than for me to say I'm a Lutheran. So he was trying very hard to downplay that this was some sort of religiously motivated attack. He said, we don't see anything, and again, the investigation is ongoing, but we don't see anything here that immediately tells us that this was some sort of a religiously intended attack.
We also had some questions here in the newsroom regarding phone calls that Police Chief Dave Zibolski participated in with some of our top federal officials, including the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, and also our Attorney General Merrick Garland. We had wondered what the nature of those phone conversations was. And today we were told by the police chief himself that there was nothing more to those conversations other than that they were calls of support and condolences to the chief and the fire department and the community.
No obvious hatred for police in anything they found online or on his phone. They have talked to some family members, but they don't, again, find anything where there is that element. Again, Tom, you mentioned earlier about the propane tanks. They have one photo of him. It's not great. They're working on a better photo, and they hope to release that sometime later today. He repeated that it's possible that this was intended to be a distraction to a bigger event, but more than likely just a whim. Just saw an area where he thought he could take out some people, and police responding. So obviously the fact that there were police there was a target for him. He didn't try to shoot citizens. He tried to shoot police, but they think that this was really just something that sort of distracted him on the way to something else that he was going to. But whether this was intended to be a distraction to a bigger crime, we don't know yet, but he apparently was distracted. There was a question, were there manifestos out there? I think a lot of us are wondering, did he have some writings behind? They said that's part of the ongoing investigation. There's no military training that they know of. They don't think he had a scanner to monitor police activity. Repeated, he was 37 years old. They are not sure when he came to Fargo or from what city, only that he came here in an asylum process back in 2012. There is no indication he was scoping out downtown. The police chief, Zibolski, said he was asked about people leaving the street fair downtown. He said, we're going to look at the deployment of people when it's a send everyone kind of call. And so he made that comment. There are no alerts when someone buys a large amount of weapons. They were asked about that. Did that send out any red flags? They said, well, it's legal to buy large amounts of ammunition. So they said there's no alerts that way. Drew Wrigley was asked about the binary triggers. Tom, you mentioned that earlier, that they turn a semi-automatic weapon into a functional equivalent of a fully automatic weapon. And Wrigley said they're purposeless in his mind. There was a question, do we think that Barakat thought he would survive all of this? And Drew Wrigley said yes. There are indications that he thought he might, whatever happened, was going to come back to his apartment after that happened, because he said he had done something that would alert him to who might get into his apartment. And just the last question, they don't know where he bought all of his ammunition. Okay, so that's a lot of information, but trying to just summarize the best we can, because a lot of it we're trying to have a lot of things sink in here as we go through this all. So I think, Tom, a lot of the questions that we hope to have answered today, I think we got some answers as far as what the law enforcement authorities know, but they don't know everything yet either.
Yes.
So I think they were very forthcoming today. I thought they gave us maybe more in some cases than they probably had to, but I think we're all thankful for being able to understand what we can. We still just don't understand why, but this, I think if you were to have Drew Wrigley here, and you say, Drew, so it just sounds like, forget about the guy's name, forget about his country of origin, forget about all that. It just sounds like a guy that got crazy as he was here. I feel like that's what Drew Wrigley is telling us, that none of those things, his country of origin, his religion, his associations here in this country, his job, past abuses that have happened to him, none of that really seems to be an overriding theme of why this happened. It just happens to be that he's a guy who came from Syria. His name is Mohammed. Drew Wrigley is not telling us that he sees connections in any of those things right now. Now, will there be more information along the way? Might they get other details that give them a different picture? Yes.
Yeah, they made it very clear that this is an ongoing investigation with the FBI, Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and the question was asked at the end to the Attorney General, how long is this investigation going to last? And I immediately knew what the answer was going to be, that he didn't have an answer for that right now, that this is still going to take, a lot of time, a lot of work by multiple agencies at all levels, local all the way up to federal. One thing that Max Schneider talked about was the seizing and the recovery of a significant number of electronic devices at Mohammed Barakat's apartment. And he said now that these devices are undergoing, as he described it, meticulous examination, trying to hopefully use some of these devices to try to understand and come to a conclusion in terms of what motivated this terrible attack. But
yes.
I thought it was very interesting, though, that he talked about recovering all these devices, and now they're taking a very close look at them. And I guess that certainly makes sense given the nature of the situation.
Okay, so you've heard the press conference. You've heard our summary, the high points. Now it's your turn. 701-293-9000, 701-293-9000. Did you hear what you wanted to hear today? Are there pieces of the story that you're still trying to figure out in your own mind? What did you think was most notable that came out of today's press conference? We look forward to hearing from you. Again, you are a big part of what we do here on WDAY and Flag, and we want you to have your chance to speak on this or to ask questions or to ask us if we heard something maybe differently than you did. We're happy to do that, and we'll be happy to stay here for a while and do just that.
Yeah, and as we wait for calls to come in, I think it's worth mentioning here one more time with regard to some of the local donation campaigns underway right now in earnest. As we've talked about, the Leadership Care Fund is a nonprofit company registered here in North Dakota. Donations can be made to that group at any Bell Bank location or online at leadershipcarefund.com. We're told that site doesn't collect any fees, ensuring all the funds will go directly to the families of officers Wallin, Dotis, and Hawes. Also, the GoFundMe campaigns running right now for Tyler Hawes, that so far has collected $31,000, and for Officer Dotis, $65,000. And several FM area businesses are launching campaigns now, fundraising campaigns, including Sandy's Donuts, Custom Graphics, Superior Customs is also putting out a police decal, and R.J. Thomas also started a campaign centered around this thin blue line sticker with the name Wallin on it. For those who are interested in picking up one of these stickers, they can come by Flag Family Media on Thunder Road between regular business hours, make a donation, and take up to 3 of these stickers to honor Officer Wallin.
It's 12:43. Let's go to the phones now. Kim is with us in the conversation today. Hi, Kim. Your question about the people, some of the people that were involved in the car accident.
Right. So they said that there were 4 people in the other car. My question is did they get injured? I mean, they're not really saying a whole lot about them. Obviously, they would have reported that in the initial part of, when the officers were down in Carly, but it'd be nice to know what their status is, too.
Yeah, Kim, good question. You're right. They have not said much about these people, and I don't get the sense it's because they don't want to say something. I think they're not people that were involved in any of the quote-unquote big newsworthy pieces, but we do know that they were in the vehicle that was hit from behind by Carly, and there was multiple people in there, and they have not really said much about them other than that they didn't get injured. They don't believe that they were part of the setup, if you will. So they were there and were either able to escape, or I believe what we heard maybe on Wednesday even was they kind of hid and laid low in the vehicle. So there doesn't seem to be a big story behind them, Kim, but you're right. We really haven't heard much about them.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you for your continued coverage on this. As a wife of a law enforcement officer, it's heartbreaking, and I'm feeling very numb from all this. So thank you again. to everybody in the community for their outpouring support.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, it was so encouraging last night to see so many blue light bulbs around my neighborhood. And I know a lot of people are doing that. And like Tom has been mentioning, several $1,000s has now been donated by some of the campaigns. So that's great. Thank you, Kim. Let's get to Mike on line 2. We've got phone lines filling up quickly, but still room for you at 701-293-9000. Mike in Moorhead, go ahead.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for taking my call. I'm calling about Tom Tucker. Right after this happened, I'd say maybe about 3 hours after it happened, he, on his half-hour report, he made sure he put the guy was white. For some reason, he gave his name, and he's white. And, no one even seen his,
Sir, this is Tom Tucker here. I don't recall that I specific. Go ahead.
Yes, you did. You said it on your newscast twice, and then you didn't say it anymore. But I thought that was extremely bad journalism.
Okay, and I'll tell. Let me.
First, no one's seen.
Go ahead.
But no one even seen the picture of him, and just because he's Muslim, in Sudan they are black. I mean, there's a lot of different. But the point of why you haven't seen anything, and right away you wanted to say he's white, to just. Seemed like you just couldn't wait to say that.
Okay, now may I respond, sir, please? First of all, I'm never anxious to report anything, and anything I do report is attributed directly to authorities and officials and law enforcement officials who provide that information to us. That was the information, if in fact I did say that, that is the information that was provided to us at that time. Now, other witnesses have also described the gunman as light-skinned and white as well.
Which we saw today on the pictures. He's as light-skinned as myself or Tom, basically from what we can tell from that picture. Certainly is not a dark-skinned complexion person. So, Mike, appreciate your call, and I think from what I know of Tom, I stand by him as a man who's reporting what needs to be reported, and I don't know if you feel like he was trying to make some nefarious point, but
which I clearly was not. Nor would I ever want to make a nefarious point in any type of situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's typical reporting to give the color of the person, whether it's convenient or not, or people like it or not. It's a part of how we identify people. Let's go to Steve in Valley City. Steve, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen. See, I listened to the whole press conference. It's pretty disturbing how this guy just happened to be upon that situation, but he was definitely looking for the right situation, and he found it that day. But they also said that, because I hunt a lot and I have trail cameras, and they mentioned that he had these at his apartment.
Yes.
And that he looked like he was thinking he was going to survive this, and had a way of knowing that by what he had in his apartment. Well, I'm assuming this, but these trail cameras, I have several that are cellular. So I'm thinking he had a cellular trail camera set up in his apartment, and once you open the door or you step in front of that camera, it automatically sends a picture to your cell phone. You're all set up for it. So I'm assuming this now, but I have these cameras. So I wouldn't put it past him that he had these cameras set up in his apartment, and he would know if someone came in that apartment while he's out on his mission or wherever he's at. So I'm just putting that out there so you guys can understand that these cell cameras can send a picture to your cell phone, and you know immediately when a deer or an animal steps in front of it. And if someone came through that door and he's running around town and they're waiting for him, he would know not to go back to his apartment.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good observation, Steve. You're right. It's like I've got on my home, I've got a doorbell that's got a camera device, and I can hop on my phone and see that. And that, I think, is what Drew Wrigley was talking about. And you're right. He said trail cams in the apartment. He didn't specify if they were operable or if they weren't working, but that certainly would give you knowledge if someone was in there, and he could double back then to the apartment and try to go after more people too. So good observation, Steve. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Bruce. Yeah, thank you, Steve. Let's go to Bruce on line 4. Good afternoon, Bruce.
Yeah, hey, I couldn't listen to all of the news conference there. I'm over here and I live in Minot, but I'm really curious. Did they say at that news conference? I know they said they had that hand grenade that was actually a working device. Did they explode that?
I don't know if they exploded it, but they said it was working. In order for them to know if it would work, I would think they would have to detonate it. And didn't he say something about they lit it on fire, lit the fuse?
That was not made clear to me. My sense was that had not happened, but I'd have to go back and listen to the audio.
They did detonate those tanks
correct.
that carried whatever it was in the propane tanks. They detonated those. I don't know, but they did say that the hand grenade was operable.
Okay, now if the hand grenade was operable, my question is, and you guys won't be able to answer this, to build a hand grenade, you got to have some type of knowledge to know what you're doing. And my heart goes off to those people. And if he was assembling that hand grenade in that apartment, good God, if that thing would have went off. But where did he get the parts for this? Is that knowledge on the internet for someone to build something like that? I'm kind of wondering if I was surprised there was no question raised about it. Where did he get the knowledge to know how to build this? My second question is, that flammable material that was in those cans or propane tanks or whatever, where did he obtain this stuff at?
Yeah.
Is that readily available? Most of that time you need a license to even buy that stuff. Where did he get that at? And my third question is, they said they looked at the computer. I'm in Minot. We got a big event going on here in Minot. Was there any indication, or was he looking at the state fair in Minot? That's another question I want to know, because I'm planning on going there next week, and I'm not saying I'm going to be scared not to go, but it's just something that I'm wondering about. And has the police department in Minot been notified? Maybe they might be on a little more higher alert. I wish that question was raised too. I'll let you go at that. I know those questions you probably can't answer, but I'll let you go.
Thank you, Bruce. Very good questions. And with Bruce dropping off, that opens up a line for you at 701-293-9000. Go ahead, Tom.
Just with regard to Minot, we have not received any indication indicating that the suspect had any designs on carrying out any such attack in Minot. We have not heard any information indicating that to be the case.
What was said today is that he had researched a lot of mass shootings, large events, things like that. They did not mention that event by name. Is it possible that he was looking around something? Possibly. It just didn't come out that way. Regarding the Minot and the state fair, it only seems reasonable that there would be an increased law enforcement presence there, but we don't want to speak for them. Regarding the searching online for how do you build a hand grenade, how do you build a bomb, how do you get, what was this substance, Tom, that we think was in the propane tanks? What was it called? Something I hadn't heard before. Anyway, whatever it was.
I believe it was something like a Tarantine.
Something like that.
Yeah.
You can find a lot of stuff online, whether you're talking about just traditional web sources or the dark web, but there's a lot out there. And can you find out how to build a hand grenade? Yeah, you can probably find out how to do a lot of things on dark web. So there's a lot that's out there. No question about that.
One thing I think the Attorney General did say with regard to the weapons and ammunition that the suspect had accrued, that was all done lawfully and legally. So with regard
that
to
is true.
Any type of explosive material, I don't know if that was included in that statement or not.
Yeah, good point, Tom. They did say that the guns and the ammunition were bought legally. How he would have gotten this other substance, we don't know much about that.
And that material that I just referred to a moment ago, tannerite, if I heard it correctly.
Okay. 12:54, we've got a little bit of time yet for you to call in, and as long as phone calls keep coming in, we will stay here and continue to visit with you. This is about all of us trying to process an unspeakable event that's happened in our community as we try to, like we say so often, we go through life together here on the radio, and we process information, try to get clarity, and try to settle our nerves sometimes, and so we continue to do that today. Let's take Mitch on line 1. He's been holding the longest. Mitch, good afternoon.
Gentlemen today. Good afternoon to you.
as regards to tannerite as an explosive, you can go to a sporting goods store and buy that as a target, like at any of your sporting goods stores around the Fargo area, wherever you go to a sporting goods store, go back into their target sections, and you can buy tannerite over the counter.
Okay, that's good to know. So when you say sporting goods store, you're not talking about Shields, but like Cabela's might have it.
Shields would have it too.
Okay, because they have firearms.
I'm sure you can go there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So,
I'm just
so
doing
that is something that is. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Mitch.
So that is something that's readily available to buy across the counter. So it's not like it's something that he had to go on the dark web to acquire or anything like that. It's readily available.
Okay. I'm just doing a quick search online of what is tannerite. Tannerite is a binary explosive used primarily as a shot indicator for firearms practice. Mitch, if you're still with us, what is tannerite used for?
That's what tannerite is basically used for explosives like that for target practicing. If you set a target out there, you can buy them in like small square boxes, packed boxes, and set it out there at 100 yards, 200 yards, 300 yards. And if you shoot at it and you hit it, it will incinerate. It will explode.
Okay, so it's an indication you hit your target.
Exactly. So if you're trying to figure out if you hit a target at, let's say, 400 yards, you look at a paper target, and look for a bullet hole, 400 yards, you better have pretty good optics as far as a spotting scope to see that. If you hit a tannerite at 400 yards, you see the implosion of it.
Okay,
it's there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing another note. Again, I'm just Google searching here, so I don't know the accuracy of what I'm seeing, but one question, how powerful is tannerite compared to dynamite? The answer is dynamite. Tannerite yields about 44% of its energy when exploding as an equivalent mass of dynamite. So, Mitch, have you shot into tannerite before?
I have not. I've seen it shot before, but I've never shot it.
Okay.
And now let's say one of the reports was that there were some propane tanks that had an incendiary substance in it. Well, if you take let's say a little 30-pound pig of propane tank, fill that full of tannerite, you shoot that with a high-power rifle, that's one hell of an explosion that's about to go off.
Yeah. Yeah, it says I'm on Wikipedia now, tannerite is designed to be non-flammable, therefore the reaction cannot be triggered by a burning fuse or electricity, although its explosion can ignite flammable material. So in some way, certainly I think we can all say the conclusion here is he had this stuff and had a way to detonate it. And again, if you hit, I don't know how you would shoot a propane tank to make the kind of impact you'd need to get that, but maybe maybe there are certain kinds of ammunition that are powerful enough to penetrate propane tanks and do what that would do.
Caller, my question, and thank you for calling us. My question is shooting a canister of tannerite the only way to cause it to explode?
Yes, pretty much. That sudden impact ignites it.
Okay.
So basically, that's only the way I know of that you could make it explode.
Gotcha. Mitch, thank you so much. That's been really helpful. Neither Tom or I have used it before, so thank you for the details there on that
You
one.
bet. Thank you guys for your coverage.
Yes, sir. We're glad to be here when needed. We wish it were under much different circumstances. Let's go to line two.
all do.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Let's go to Jim on line 2. Good afternoon, Jim.
Hi, good afternoon, Steve. I just kind of wanted to chime in. He kind of stole my thunder on the tannerite. I was going to let you know what that was, but you can also buy it at Fleet Farm and places like that. But
okay.
I also wanted to say, this may sound like a weird comment at first, but let me explain. I can really see God's hand all over the saving of lives in this incident. From, this guy was heading downtown to do God knows what, and there happens to be an accident where there's police officers within blocks of where this guy was probably going to go. So he figured, oh, great, there's going to be a quick response to what I'm doing. So he had to stop and probably thought in his mind he had to take those guys out. And then from the officer Robinson that went after him when he, accidentally disarmed him by hitting the gun that didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And then him fiddling around trying to get his slide to rack around, and he couldn't do it, and totally outgunning this police officer with incredible courage. It's just, I can see all over this the prevention of so many lost lives in this deal.
Jim, I've thought that too many times, and it's hard to say that when you got a 23-year-old young man who has died, right? And I kind of see this the way you do, and you say, God, you did awesome to spare everybody else. Couldn't you have just spared this one other soul? And for whatever reason, that wasn't what happened that day. But you're right. We've said this from the very beginning. It could have been so much worse. Had Barakat said, I just want to take out some people and not waited for police, I mean, how many civilians could he have taken down just by starting to shoot at them instead of the police who you knew were going to fire back at you? It's amazing to think about what could have happened. And you're right. It's that tricky balance of an awful loss of life, but certainly could have been so much worse. And I, like you, Jim, I see this as God was involved. Wish you would have been involved a little bit more on Officer Wallin for sure. But thank you, Jim, for giving us a call and giving us your perspective today.
Yeah, and Jim and Steve, I agree with you both that God's hand appears to be at work in this incident. And I just thought it was worth noting that at the start of the press conference here today, our Attorney General said, "Let us give prayerful thanks with regard to the fact that this could have been much worse than it was."
Yeah, true. Yeah, and that was tough to listen to too, without tearing up a little bit.
Yeah, and Drew Wrigley himself a couple of times has struggled to keep it together because you can tell it's affected him too. Thank you very much, Jim. It's 102 here on WDAY, AM 970 and FM 93.1, and WZFG, The Flag, AM 1100 and FM 92.3, Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo. We are continuing our live coverage of the press conference that was held earlier today, where the FBI and BCI and Drew Wrigley, the North Dakota Attorney General, held a briefing to talk more about the incident that happened last Friday, 1 week ago today. Depending on you, this is about you and your opportunity to speak what you'd like to speak, process the information. So we're going to stay here for a while and allow you to call in and give your thoughts or ask questions, whatever you'd like to do. Our Weather and Ag team is standing by, and we will join them in progress here at some point, we believe, this hour. But we still have an opportunity to hear from you at 701-293-9000, 701-293-9000 is our phone number. You can also email. You can send an email to me, steve@flagfamily.com, if you would like to do it that way. And we can get your message or your comments that way as well. Let's go to Tom Tom on line 4. Good afternoon, Tom.
Yeah.
Hello. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. Given the Biden administration's reputation of their DOJ, do you think that this is pretty much an FBI pointing this at them because they're so biased? If this would have been, say, somebody of white Caucasian that had visited some white supremacy sites, probably would have been wearing a MAGA hat, do you think they would be labeling this a little sooner as a terrorist hate type of crime like they like to do when it's that direction? And here they're stepping away and already saying that nothing to do with his race, with his religion, with any of his involvement with any other type of, not calling it a terrorist, not calling it a hate crime. What do you think if this would have been a little bit of different situation? They'd already been hollering about.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for the call. Appreciate the question today. Yep. I will say that in cases like this, I have seen, and I've been in the news business in and out of it for a while, and Tom, you have as well. Typically, law enforcement on the local level like this is not going to get into speculation on topics that tend to be more politically driven nationally. And certainly what you're talking about is something a lot of people have asked questions about. But when you have situations like this, generally, if you're going to get those comments, that would come from on high in the government where people want to make a political point. What you saw today and what you've seen so far here locally is just local cops, local law enforcement trying to tell you what happened here. here and trying to give as much detail as they can on things that it's going to give you an accurate assessment of the situation. So I guess I don't know how a press conference like this might have happened in San Jose, California, if there would have been, if the Drew Wrigley of California would have wanted to make a political comment, he certainly could have. But certainly in our part of the world, I think people are a little more level-headed than that. They're not political animals, and they just say, here's what we know and here's what we don't.
Yeah, Steve, it is refreshing that and comforting to know that our elected officials, state and local, have not yet apparently or outwardly turned this into a political topic. So I'm grateful that that's the case. I think your assessment in terms of, federal officials maybe touching upon the politics of events like this, as opposed to that happening at the local level, I think that's right on. I do think those we did hear from today at this press conference, I would say they were careful, measured, and reserved in terms of the commentary that they were providing. And at this point in this investigation, I think that's appropriate.
Emailer Dan says, Steve, did they say when the shooter actually died? I heard that they cuffed him because he was still alive, but did they say when he died? No. And Dan, I was hoping that would be asked today because I had that same question. What they did say is that he was shot, and I want to say that at 3:06 they said that he was alive but in serious distress, and so he was neutralized. I think they would probably use that word at 3:06, but he was, we believe, initial reporting that we heard was that he was taken to a hospital as well, where he was obviously in custody, but they were trying to care for him medically, and so they didn't really specify, did he die on the scene?
They did not.
Or there. And I don't think we know that about Jake Wallin either.
No.
If he died on the scene or if he died in care. I thought it was notable today that, Tom, correct me if I heard this wrong, but that it sounded like all three of the police officers who got shot did. But then I think I heard him say something about scrambled for cover or tried to get to a place where they could take some cover. But we've also heard reporting that Wallin was shot in the head or neck area, which might have made it difficult for him to move. So we don't know exactly when Wallin died either, if it was at the scene or in the hospital.
You are correct on that. And I don't think we were given a tremendous amount of information in terms of what those officers did once they fell to the ground. We did not get any details in terms of what happened in the immediate moments after that in terms of how they might have been acting or how they might have responded.
Tim emails, he came to the U.S. seeking asylum. Asylum from whom and for what reason? That was referred to today. Good question, Tim. It was asked today too. They said that all they said is he came from Syria in 2012 through the asylum program. And I don't know enough about how that specifically works, but generally you have to show that you are under duress in the place that you live and you are seeking refugee status to get away from something bad that's happening. And I don't know in 2012 exactly what was happening in Syria, but he came to the United States for that purpose through that process. And Max Schneider did say that is being looked into. I think our Scott Hennon asked that question. Do we know why he came and exactly what that process was? He properly vetted? If you remember right, this was a big item during that kind of 2012 election campaign in 2016 with refugee resettlement into our country. What is that process? And I think it was Attorney General Jim Comey, and Comey, the name's kind of confuse me now. I'm trying to remember them specifically, but I think it was Jim Comey who said that we cannot fully vet people coming from certain areas. We don't know who they are when they go through that process, which turned into a large conversation piece as we got into the elections cycle of, I think it was 2012 or 2016. So, Tim, we don't know, but Max Schneider said that they are looking into that. So hopefully that is information that will come at some point. But thank you for that. My question, Nate says, my question was Mohammed Barakat, part of the Barakat terrorist network that is currently sanctioned by the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and is he part of the Hezbollah terrorist organization from Syria, Iraq, and the tri-border area of Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay? They weren't asked that question specifically, but they said multiple times that we don't see any ties to him being part of a terrorist organization, that he had some manifesto that he was carrying out an attack on behalf of some organization or some religious purpose. So they did say that. Okay, thank you for that. Let's go back to the phones. Joey is with us here on line one. Joey, good afternoon.
Hi, thanks for taking the call. Just to expand on that tannerite a little bit, when you buy tannerite, you got to mix it up and you set it out and you shoot it and it explodes. But it's a powder, right? So it's not like dynamite is powerful as, but it takes a certain velocity bullet to get that to explode. You can't just take a .22 pistol or rifle to get that to explode. It won't do anything. You got to have a high-powered rifle, and usually you're shooting at it in a plastic jug. So this was in a propane tank, a steel tank, and that would affect the velocity of the bullet entering the tannerite itself. So I think that he might have actually had to go out and test this before he tried it, because it's almost a theory instead of, hey, I have to go set this out and it's just going to explode. So, and then if he was planning on going somewhere and setting it out, he's going to run out there with a rifle in a crowd and then back up 200 feet and shoot it, and it's going to explode. So it doesn't really make sense how we planned on using that, in my mind. That's
Yeah,
just a little expansion on the tannerite.
Yeah, good questions and some good perspective there. I guess one theory could be he had 3 tanks of gasoline in the car, 3 containers of gasoline. Maybe he thought he could turn his car into one big bomb with the tannerite that could ignite the gasoline and who knows whatever else he might have had in there. Maybe that was his thinking. I don't know. At the street fair, you can park fairly close to where the people are, and so they did say that he had the means to detonate the tannerite, which could just mean the high-powered rifle. I had the same question that you did, that, you know, could a bullet penetrate a steel tank enough to cause the kind of impact that would be needed to detonate that? So very interesting questions and good perspective there. Let's go to
another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Joey.
Is it my imagination, or has this not really hit the national news level that I think it deserves? I mean, this would have. If you think about this, there's people walking around Fargo right now that might not have been walking around Fargo right now today.
Yes. Yep. You're 100% right. Thank you, Joey. We'll let you go. There's a bunch of other folks that want to jump in. I know that. So Mark Levin on a national talk radio show discussed this a couple of days ago, and I think it's been picked up a little bit. I know CNN had just a basic headline on it. Fox News has had a basic headline on it, but not anything more than just a man is dead and 3 police officers as well.
CBS Evening News had a brief mention on their national newscast Friday night, including some local footage from the scene. Yahoo News has also had an article online in recent days as well.
Yeah,
a little bit.
It hasn't, to an earlier caller's point, it hasn't created a firestorm where people have responded nationally in the news cycle like we've seen with other shootings recently. Our Scott Hennon has been at City Hall for the press conference today and joins us now for some perspective on what we heard there today. Scott, good afternoon. Thanks for chiming in. Your questions, I thought, got some good responses today. Your perceptions on what you heard today and anything you want to add to the conversation?
Well, I just heard the gentleman talking about the tannerite, and they were being careful not to mention which shooting range he was at. But I did hear that he was actually asked to leave one shooting range that he was at because he was testing tannerite there.
Oh, okay.
So I just wanted to pass that along because that caller was very insightful in saying, you're not just going to do this. You're going to have to know how to react or whatever. Yeah. So
the forum reported today that that it was Red River Valley or Red River Regional Marksmanship Center that gave a comment that yes, he had been there, but didn't want to discuss or chose not to discuss what he was doing there. So that is one range that has been reported that he had been at. The forum had called several other ranges, and they either declined to comment or said he had not been there.
Yeah. So anyway, just another piece of information there. I mean, I think you certainly can applaud the individuals, there, Drew Wrigley, Chief Zibolski, Max Snyder, the U.S. Attorney. They took every question. That was an exhaustive press conference. You don't see many like that. Normally you get 3-4 questions in, maybe 5 from members of the media, but they were going around and making sure everybody had gotten their questions answered. So I certainly applaud them for that. I don't have anything else to add, to what we heard today, other than certainly what could have been, I think, is in clear focus to everybody. There's no doubt about it. And there's some more work to do to find out, whether or not this individual is connected with some other folks. So certainly an informative press conference.
Yeah, Scott, I had the same exact impression. There were members, myself was one of them for sure, that was critical of them not allowing us to ask more questions to find out maybe what we could at that time, because we found out later that additional information came out that could have been known, but we didn't get the chance to ask. Certainly understanding they're in a difficult time. Today, they were completely on the other side of the spectrum. They gave us a lot of opportunities to ask questions, and very much appreciated. I think the community too feels like, okay, we're getting some of these details that can be shared, and that helps in a time like this. So that's my impression is the same as yours, Scott. Thanks very much. Scott, anything else to add? Otherwise, we'll let you go.
No, these callers are great, so keep going.
Okay, boss. 116 here on WDAY and Flag. We are continuing with our simulcast as we continue to process what we heard today, and as a community, as we continue to process and grieve and heal after what has happened here. Again, the big storyline coming out of today is it does not appear as though there are other people that he was working in concert with. Does not appear it was a religiously motivated shooting. Right now, they don't have any motive other than he was just determined to kill some people. And unfortunately started with this accident that happened over on 25th Street in Fargo. 293-9000 is our phone number, 701-293-9000. What needs to be said that hasn't been said yet? Would love to hear from you. Or what are you still really hoping to know more about that you feel like you'd like more information on? I'd love to hear from you on that as well. Let's go to Gary in Grand Forks. Gary, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Say thank you for taking my call. I've got a bunch of questions and so forth. I was in a relationship for 6 years with the IRS special agent in Fargo, and also have a relative that was with the FBI. So I've got a little bit of insight, but it's nothing, related to what happened on Friday. There's 5 million potential terrorists coming across our southern border, and this guy had trail cameras and 2 propane tanks, but family is not in the area. There was also a question raised about a connection with Hawley, Minnesota, and also got a question about this Guardian report. I think Max Snyder is a weak-kneed person, along with your chief of police. They don't answer questions. They just seem like they're very weak. Thank God for Drew. And I got a question about the binary trigger. And
yes?
Oh, okay. I just heard a beep in my phone.
No, we're just we're letting you finish. And we do have some full phone lines, Gary. So if you could just, trying to be kind to you, but if you could get to your question, please. Thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead, Gary. What is your question about the binary trigger?
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that. And I think there is a community in Fargo. I know there's one in Grand Forks that are funded by these Black Lives Matter people, and they intimidate national business for millions of dollars. That's where this guy was funded from, or he's probably a drug dealer. I think we need to mount our resistance against these people, because there's still hundreds of them in Fargo. I won't come to Fargo. I lived there a number of years ago. I won't even come there anymore. It's a terrorist haven for these criminals. Your chief of police coddles them and so forth. And
okay, Gary, I think we catch your drift. Your question on the binary trigger. I don't know much about this either, though, other than what I've learned over the last few days, and it basically allows you to adapt a typical rifle trigger so that it fires on the squeeze of the trigger and then on the relax of the trigger, the recoil of the trigger, whatever the correct term is. So basically, Drew Wrigley said today, when you fire once, you're really firing twice, I guess, unless you're moving the gun at a rapid pace left to right or up and down. But if you keep the gun still and you press the trigger, you're going to get 2 bullets to be fired out of there. And regarding some of the other storylines that you brought in, I just think those may all be things that apply here, but we don't know those things at this point, and so we'll let the investigation come out. And if he was part of something else that happened, then certainly those details will surface. Let's go to Bernie on line 3. Good afternoon, Bernie. You're welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. The shooter looks familiar. Did he work at a department store selling guns at one time?
That was not discussed today. We've heard reports of that he worked at a store locally that sells firearms, but nothing that we're reporting. So don't know the answer to that, Bernie.
I think I bought a gun from him about 4 years ago.
Okay. Well, he certainly was somebody who knew a lot about firearms. So he certainly could have worked in that line of work. Yeah, it's very possible, Bernie.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you got it. Thanks for giving a call.
Right.
Let's go to Jim in West Fargo. Jim, good afternoon.
Yeah, hi. My comment was this, is that what the heck was the idea of that clown Heidkamp asking that stupid question about why they're calling them long guns? You know, everybody sees what to do, trying to politicize this and make it out like they're trying to cover up the fact that they were AR-style rifles or whatever. What the heck does that have to do with anything with the investigation? You know, that guy be at those if that's the kind of questions he's going to ask and try to stir up trouble like that, he shouldn't even be allowed there.
Yeah, I guess I can't speak for what the intent of the question was. I think Drew Wrigley was trying to say, I'm not trying to avoid calling a gun anything. I'm just using the term that's been used as the guns have been described to me. It certainly seemed that there was a point that was being made during that question. And I think Drew Wrigley, to his credit, said, I don't have a problem talking about calling an AR. I got a couple at home. So I thought he handled that very well.
Wrigley's on top of his game, you know, and it's just, it saddens me to think that local media is trying to stir the pot in this trend. I think that's just opinion.
Yep. Okay, Jim, thanks for giving a call. You're probably not the only one that had that reaction, so thank you for giving us a call. 123-701-293-9000, 701-293-9000 is our phone number here. Let's go to Loretta in Fargo. Loretta, good afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. I was tuning in kind of late, so I don't know if this was already addressed, but my question is the propane tanks filled with that liquid. I'm not really familiar with that liquid. Is that an explosive? And if so, is it legal to buy, or would he have, what is that?
Yeah, we've been talking. Yeah, we've been talking a fair amount of that, but we get it. You're coming in and out of life, and you join when you can, so no problem. Yeah,
sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So it's called tannerite, and it's actually a powder, but it can be mixed together and put in a container so that if you're doing target practice, say from 300-400 yards away, you may not know if you hit your target, but this tannerite is a combustible substance that allows you to get a little an explosion of some kind. So from a distance away, you can see that you hit the target. And tannerite was put into these propane tanks in some form, and the thought was that it could be triggered by a bullet of some kind hitting that tank with enough force that it could penetrate the wall of the steel tank and then cause the tannerite to explode. And so the question then is, did he have this in the car to take it to wherever, the street fair, Red River Valley Fair, wherever, and try to turn his car into one big bomb because he had 3 tanks of gasoline in the car as well. So I think that's the story on the tannerite, Loretta.
Okay, thank you. That
You're
answers
welcome.
that for me. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, glad to do it. Let's go to Brad on line 2. Brad in Fargo. Good afternoon, Brad.
Yeah, good afternoon, Steve. Thanks for the show. I have a question on the fire at his apartment. Was it a grease fire? Was he making explosives? Did they see something? Did they say something? Is there any way to dig up that report? of what the fire was in his apartment when they did arrive there, and when was that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they said the fire was back in 2018, Tom. Do I remember right? They did say something about the incident.
I don't recall the date, but if I do recall correctly, they did not specify the nature of that fire or that fire call itself.
Yeah, and it's a good question, because if they came to a guy's apartment because something was on fire, you'd have thought it could tell you that, hey, there's some guy experimenting on how to build tannerite tanks for some reason. Or if they showed up and there was a lot of information and a lot of guns and whatever, it would maybe tip you off to something nefarious was being planned. So, Brad, it's a good question, and I think it's probably one that the astute reporters in this town will dig into to find out, is there something that could have tipped off the authorities much earlier than again, nobody was tipped off. There was no suspicion of this gentleman before this happened. Ty Schoenert has joined us from the WDAY newsroom. Ty, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So yes, they talked about the fire. They said it was a cooking fire. That there was no affiliation with any of the.
That's right, they did. You're right.
They said it was a cooking fire.
Yep.
So there's no affiliation with any crimes or anything like those.
Yeah,
things.
but during I think what our caller is asking is, when they came, was there anything suspicious that showed up there? And obviously nothing suspicious enough, but it would be interesting to see if that fire call is out there. And I'm sure the investigators are looking through that. But yeah, thank you, Ty, for reminding us of that. It was called a cooking fire, is how it was termed then.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. 127, we've got full phone lines, 701-293-9000. I'm sorry if I've given the flag number a time or two. I've been on that station a little bit recently as well. 293-9000 is the phone number here. Let's go back to the phone lines here. Doreen is on line 3. Good afternoon, Doreen.
Hi. Yes. Thank you guys for your coverage. I have kind of been following this since it happened, because I am in Grand Forks, but I was at the street fair. So a lot of it is really hitting home. And I have to make a comment about Let's Hear It for the Pep Band. I was in Bemidji and worked there when they had the school shooting. So my hearts not only are with law enforcement and the first responders, but the healthcare staff that received this.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know the cops. I know these people, whatever. But let's not forget about the scene that erupted for them, too. And I'm not saying that people aren't. I'm just, like I said, I'm doing Let's Hear It for the Pep Band because of the good care and the stuff that we have in North Dakota, Sanford, blah, blah, blah. Just think of the event that unfolded for them. Someone might have said, geez, it's kind of a slow day at work.
Oh, no kidding. Yes. Oh,
Do you know
Doreen,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
I do. Thank you for bringing this up. We have not talked about them enough and given credit there. We've talked about the firefighters who arrived, and all due credit to them, certainly law enforcement. But yes, can you imagine being on duty at the hospital and all of a sudden you get that coming in? Absolutely right.
So like I said, I just had to do the Let's Hear It for the Pep Band.
Oh, good for you, Doreen. Yep, you made this program better by saying that, and you're 100% right. So the ambulance, the EMTs, the paramedics, all the people that were involved in this. Yeah, Doreen, thank you for bringing that up.
Even the PTSD type of thing of the site of this. The whole trauma event. Like I said, they're trained professionals, but oh my God.
Yeah, no kidding. Yep. Thank you, Doreen.
And I have to commend the guy that said something about Jesus being with us, because he's been with me this last week.
I think he's been with all of us. Yeah, no question about it.
Could have been me. But thank you, all you guys, for what you do and carrying this, because we all need to know.
Yeah, we all need to know, and it helps just to talk about it, doesn't it, Doreen? So we'll keep doing it. Thank you so much, my friend. All right, let's go to Bob on line 2. Bob, good afternoon. Bob calling from West Fargo. Hi, Bob.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the tannerite, and I would like to talk about the the binary trigger.
Yes.
I've shot with the binary trigger, and it's very difficult to be accurate with that. And it's really not much fun to shoot unless you really want to just go blast off a bunch of rounds, get your barrel all hot. And so if he was skilled with that, I mean, I don't know where he was shooting with that, but that would have really turned a lot of heads because he would have been having to do an awful lot of practice to actually be accurate with that.
Okay.
And I put three things together. I put the tannerite, the game cameras, and the telephones all in one bundle. And I'm just wondering if that's the way they were made to be used. You know, as far as the game cameras,
great question.
Made to detonate. And that's just food for thought.
Yeah, they did say multiple phones, which I thought was interesting, Tom, because for a guy who hasn't had much communication with anybody, to have multiple phones is certainly an interesting piece to this. And I think that's why from the beginning law enforcement has been kind of hinting and now coming out and saying that something large scale was planned. And certainly you don't have large amounts of tannerite and tanks and things like that unless you're interested in doing something good or doing something no good. And you could certainly turn a modest amount of material into a pretty big impact if you knew how to use those things accurately. So yeah, the trail cams, the phones, all these things together, certainly a lethal concoction for sure.
One interesting note, according to one online source here, with regard to the binary trigger, this source indicates that a 30-round magazine can be emptied in about 3 seconds.
Can be emptied in about 3 seconds.
Yeah,
okay.
A 30-round magazine.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Bob, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and very little getting hit with it too, because it's awful hard to be accurate when you're blasting like that.
Bob, if you were at the gun range and the guy next to you in the aisle next to you is firing off a gun with a binary trigger, would that arouse any suspicion from people that might have been in the range at that time, or is that you're just kind of doing your own thing? You got your earmuffs on. You don't really pay attention. Even if you did, that's not all that uncommon to hear somebody shooting with that.
Well, I tell you what, where I shoot my rifle at is out in Castleton. And, I mean, we get some awful shady characters out there, and that's actually where I shot a binary trigger because somebody was out there shooting with it. And I said, hey, let me try that thing. But, yeah, there is some times when I'm out there and it's just myself and maybe a group of people where I won't go down range to check my target. And when I walk to my truck, I mean, I'm pretty much got my head on a swivel because it's just kind of uncomfortable.
Okay.
But yeah, they turn heads for sure. I mean, it's not every day somebody's out there shooting with a binary trigger. And that tannerite, it depends on who's out there too. Somebody will be chased off the range if they're shooting tannerite out there. But I've seen tannerite being shot out there. In fact, I've got some tannerite in some of my range games too. But they're just for my own use, just out in the my own little thing.
Yeah.
They're small ones. They're not huge and all this. But
sure.
That's kind of just fun stuff. Every boy likes to see things go bang.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
When you shoot tannerite, what type of packaging or container is it in? And am I correct to think that if it's put inside a propane tank or canister, that if that canister were to explode, say versus some other soft packaging, that this canister is capable of causing so much more significant damage compared to if it was in some other type of package?
Yeah, they're okay. To answer your second question first, they said he had a Model 700, Remington Model 700. If you're going to shoot a propane tank, that's probably what you're going to be shooting it with because 223 is just a 22 round actually. And that's not going to really penetrate. I mean, it's a fast, sharp 22, but that's not going to penetrate a propane tank that I know of. It's pretty doubtful that would. So if he was going to shoot a tank like that, I'm guessing it was at a Remington 700 that he would have been shooting that with. But I'm thinking that maybe those trail cams and hooked up to a cellular system. I wonder if that wasn't a detonation device that he was trying to do.
Bob, one last question before we let you go. You talked about the differences in the firearms, and I know very little about this. I should know more than I do, but there's different kinds of ammunition that can be bought for different kinds of firearms as well. Does the Remington you're talking about, does that take a different kind of ammunition that could penetrate steel. You hear about like there are bullets out there that can penetrate a vest or whatever. Does that fire the kind of ammunition that could penetrate a steel tank, do you think?
Yeah, that'd be like a 30-06. Like I said, the 223. That's not that people say, oh, that'll blow your head off. That won't blow your head off. A 223. It's going to put a hole in you, but it's not going to blow your head off. Now, a 30-06. If you've done any deer hunting and hit any deer with that, that's a round. That thing really goes bang. But the 223. The thing is the recoil, there's not a lot of recoil. They're just fun to shoot. That's why everybody has one. And most people that have them, they're just out there shooting paper. And, they said they had 223 and 223 rounds. Now, he didn't have any 5.56 green tips, the military rounds, or they didn't say anything about that.
They did not.
They said they were 223. So those were probably all target rounds that he was shooting.
Okay.
But they'll still kill you.
Yeah, for sure.
When you're dead, you're dead. Who cares what round you should get shot by? But
yeah, exactly. Bob, thank you. You've helped us out a lot here, providing some good perspective on this. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
I go back, Tom, to what was mentioned earlier by the gentleman who said, if he was going to try to actually make this happen, you got to have more than a theory. You got to go try this out somewhere. And so that is, I think, a really interesting point that was made. Where was he out trying to field test this stuff to see what would work, and was that done at one of the local shooting ranges? I'm sure those are questions that investigators are asking.
As you might recall, I think someone did say that at one range he was asked to leave when apparently he was using tannerite at that location. I do believe I heard that in a conversation.
I think Scott Hennon told
today.
us that as he kind of chimed in after the press conference. 1:37 here on WDAY Radio and The Flag as we continue our simulcast coverage here, processing what we have heard over the last 3 days and what we heard in the press conference today. We will continue to be here and take your phone calls and talk about this as long as you want to. It's well past lunch hour, and so Tom and I, we might be hungry, but we'll find a little beef jerky along the way. So keep those phone calls coming, 701-293-9000. Let's go to William in Fargo, and he joins us on the program. Hi, William.
Hey, so first of all, there's an episode of Mythbusters that they blow up some tannerite.
Okay.
And it's their largest explosion ever on the show.
Oh, no kidding.
So if you YouTube it, it's on YouTube, and they shoot it with a gun. So they did an experiment where they ran the car, and they couldn't get it to explode, so they shot it with a gun. So it is possible that's what he was doing. If he had it in his trunk, he was going to park car somewhere and shoot it. Now, the other question that I have is, did they say where the officers were shot or where the suspect was shot and killed, where their injuries were or anything like that?
No.
And were they all shot in the back or anything like that, like they were running away, and so he did it in a most cowardly way ever, shooting them in the back?
I'm trying to remember this. I want to say, well, you asked a few questions. Let me try to take them one at a time. I guess the most recent, the easiest to remember. I believe that what Drew Wrigley said today was they did not have a chance to turn around. I'm going back to my notes. Yeah, they didn't have a chance to turn, to crouch, or grab a weapon. It was drop, drop, drop. And so the three all got hit quickly, all together, right at the same time, and they were not facing Bearcat. So he shot him either from the side or behind. So yes, it was as cowardly as you think it is.
With Willeen being the first officer to be shot.
Yeah, and Willeen, our reporting is that he was shot in the head or neck area, and so that might be why his injuries were could not live through them. They did not give any sort of update on that. It was not asked if someone could speak to what the uniqueness of Willeen's injuries were, why he was not able to survive this. So we don't know a lot of detail there, but our reporting is that Willeen was hit up high and that one of the other officers was hit in the abdomen. Other than that, we don't know anything yet, and it wasn't asked and they didn't say today.
And then Carly was shot in the lower legs. Correct.
Yeah, I believe it's the hip and the knee. It's waist down, I think, is what I remember. It wasn't upper body. So, yes, that's correct, William.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir. 140, that opens up a line for you, 701-293-9000. Mark in Fargo is with us. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hi, Steve and Tom.
Hello, sir.
Howdy.
I have a question. It's more concerned about policy than anything else because I've been following this ever since the press conference and post-press conference and everything else. And, maybe I'm a bad guy. I don't really care where it is from, where he got the money to buy this, what his relationship with Buddhism or whatever it is. I mean, I don't really care, but my main concern of this whole incident, because Fargo-Moorhead is not a small community anymore. I mean, we had 3 big events going on, and speculation is that he had plans to take out 1 or 2 of them. So is the police department, or are they working on a policy that, I mean, you got 3 events and you all hands on deck, and then all of a sudden everybody leaves. One, maybe it's a diversion. He gets everybody over there, and then he goes back over there and blows up another 50 people. I mean,
yeah, that's a theory that's been floated.
That you know of.
Yeah, that's a theory that's been floated around quite a bit. Could he have done this to get all the cops to descend on the area? And certainly, when an officer calls "send everybody," there was some comments today about one of the people that was in attendance said something about they thought people were leaving downtown and going over to 25th Street. Well, then obviously that leaves that area unprotected. And Chief Zibolski did say we'll have to talk about what happened, who we left, and he's not going to tell us obviously how they deployed their people. But I think to your point on that, Mark, you're right that you can't have everybody in town going to one place so that everybody else will be unprotected. But police are smart, and their training would tell them that you don't do that in times where there's a lot going on. So certainly it's something you think would have been a conversation, but the chief himself said, we will take a look back at what we did, and are there changes that we would make going forward, or maybe new protocols that we should establish based on what we learned out of this?
Yeah, I know, being a veteran of 16 years in law enforcement, I mean, to be at just for example, the street fair or whatever, and you've got a comrade that's, well, actually 3 that are down over there, it would be very tough to stay there.
And remember, nobody knew for a while that it was only 1 gunman. For all they knew, it might have been 6 guys in there that were just waiting to pick off cops and people. And so, sure, when you hear "send everybody," and you don't know, but you just know that 3 officers are down, if I have that opportunity, it's my discretion as a law enforcement officer, I'm heading over there. But I've got to believe that somebody would have said too, okay, there's a few of us downtown, let's send 3 people over, but let's still keep 5 here. I've got to believe that law enforcement would have acted in that way because it seems obvious. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
We were also told that there was private security at the street fair as well, although we weren't told exactly how many private security officers were there as well.
Yeah, true. All right, Mark, thanks very much for giving a call. We appreciate it. Let's move along. That opens up a phone line for you, 701-293-9000. Before we do that, though, our Scott Hennon had a chance to visit with Drew Wrigley, North Dakota Attorney General, and Drew has sort of become the, I don't know what you want to call it, poster child's not the right way, but he's become something of an elevated presence in our community, certainly the way he has handled this and given us the details, but also a little bit of theater along the way, whether it was intentional or not. And so he's become kind of the star of this show and the main communicator of what's been going on. And our own Scott Hennon had a chance to sit down after the press conference and have a follow-up conversation with Drew Wrigley.
Drew, first just summarize what you want people to know from today's press conference.
It begins, of course, with the heroism and courage of our law enforcement officers. The men and women in uniform in this region are conscientious. They're well trained. They're smart. And when the chips were down that day, they delivered on our behalf. And what they protected this community from was someone who, in the person of Mohammed Barakat, who had armed himself both with armaments, with weapons, with the firepower necessary to carry out a mass fatality event, but then also he had armed himself with, studying, researching, reading up on mass casualty events, and including the night before. He read an article on the Red River Valley Fair and a couple other things, but not Red River Valley Fair. Sorry. Well, yeah, that, but then also the street fair. And we believe, because of where he was going and the armaments he had in the vehicle, and then combined with the research that he was doing, that's what was at stake. I mentioned in the press conference the thin blue line. The thin blue line was under assault. It was under attack. It took casualties, but it did not break. And our community should be very proud, justifiably, of the men and women in uniform.
Incredible when we know what we know now about the fact that he was at least at Search Street Fair and was heading down 25th Street, as you said. Why do you believe he stopped for the traffic accident?
I think that he saw an opportunity to begin his mass casualty event. I don't know how else to say it. He drove around the area a little bit, seemed to be casing up the situation, intuitively knowing there'll be more law enforcement response to this than this year. He got there right after the accident had happened. There were 2 officers on scene, and he guessed right. 4 officers were then on scene. And some other officers even came by but didn't stop. There might have been others who were directly in harm's way. They didn't need any more officers. They had 4 was sufficient for a fender bender accident. So that's why it was just, as I said, it's the sometimes horrible winds of fate that had that accident in his path. And it drew his attention because it was an opportunity for him to begin what we believe his intentions were, to create a mass casualty event.
And so much so, you mentioned at the press conference that he was literally at the range the day of.
Yes, we received information here in the last 24 hours that on the day of this horrible attack and murder, he was fine-tuning his shooting skills at a local range.
You've seen a lot of crime. You've seen a lot of bad actors. You've seen a lot of evil. Where do you put this one?
You know, it makes me think of a case I tried when I was a young prosecutor. I tried a case, got done, got a guilty verdict, was walking up the hall with a very experienced older gentleman who was the defense lawyer. I looked at him and I said, "Joe, you do know that your client's the bottom of the barrel." And he laughed and put his arm on my shoulder, and he said something I'll never forget, because he was right. He said, "Drew, how long have you been doing this?" At the time, I'd been a prosecutor 2.5 years. That's almost 30 years ago. He said, "Drew, I've got bad news for you. You are never going to see the bottom of the barrel." And he's been right over and over and over. You can never believe sometimes that the bottom of the barrel seems bottomless when it comes to the depravity, the blackness of heart. With some people, the ability to do ill, to do harm, to bring damage to other human beings. It's heartbreaking, but it's part of what drives me across these decades to do this work, to work hand in glove with law enforcement, to try to wring out justice in individual cases with the hope that it will bring more and more peace to our communities. Simple as that. So, yeah, there's no way to rank it. Like I said, and unfortunately, the bottom of the barrel just keeps deepening.
We know a lot more than we did, obviously, a week ago. We know more than we did after Monday's conversation about Zach Robinson's heroism. What don't we know at this point?
I don't have anything to add. I mean, that I can talk about now.
But from the standpoint of, a typical case, what you know in the first week versus what you know in month 2, month 3, do you think there's a lot more to learn here?
I think we'll talk more about the investigation as we go along. And this week, we had our comments in there today and answered all the questions that we could. But we have to stay focused too here on the celebration of the life of a young man who gave his life for our community, and Jake Willeen, him and his family, and the other officers in this incident that were injured so seriously, and the citizen, one of our newest citizens, been here 3 weeks. The heroism of the responders and of the last man standing during the events, Officer Zach Robinson. We got to be thinking about those folks and the people around them, closest to them, who are suffering right along with them. Our prayers are with them, are going to remain there as we continue the investigation going forward. we will gather together this week to mourn a young officer who I spoke with his parents yesterday. Get to the end of the call, and they thanked me for the call. I got to thank them for their son.
Jake Willeen will be a name that will live on in Fargo for many, many years for his heroism, along with the others as well. No doubt about that. Let's talk a little bit about. You got to go. You got to go. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Be Worthy comment that came out Monday, because it's gone viral since. It's everywhere. What did you mean by that?
All of us need to take stock of whether we're doing our part to be worthy of what these men and women in uniform do on our behalf. They make the decision to go into this line of work. They take seriously their training and attainment of skills. They, every day, go into harm's way on our behalf. And every day they're in that harm's way, even in a situation, as we saw here with a fender bender. So when there are people that will do that, they'll do things that we won't. When they do that, we need to be worthy of what they're willing to risk on our behalf. People that they haven't even met us, and they're willing to risk that. We need to be worthy of that, and to do that, we have to do our part. And that means having the will to do difficult and push for difficult things, like push back against ill-minded reform that is really based on something other than public safety. I can't even figure it out sometimes. We've got reform movements, and I'm for some of it. And we want to do things to stop driving recidivism. But I will fight till my last day in public service, and I will ask members of the public to fight to ensure that we have the laws in place, the sentencing structure in place, to keep people who are dangerous to their community, to keep them apart, to keep them incarcerated for longer periods of time if necessary, to protect the public. That takes a will too. And I said the other day, sometimes that seems like a harsh thing, but you can delineate. I've been in this line of work a long time. You can delineate between people who they've got drug problems, they've got alcohol problems, they've got mental health issues, and that are driving their recidivism. And then there are people who have a whether it's a sense of entitlement about what they're doing, a callous disregard for the care and safety of others and their communities, and are running roughshod over the rights of others. And I feel strong passion, not because I want to see a jail cell close behind somebody, but because I want to protect the next victim that's going to come from that person. So for too long, I've been preaching this now in the last years here as the Attorney General. We have a rising violent crime problem in North Dakota. It is irrefutable that is the case, and it's been going on for many years now. And it's been escalating, and we are not making the policy decisions to have truth in sentencing, to making sure that we've got laws that deal harshly with violent offenders and protect the public. And we have too many people coming out the back door too quickly by nameless, faceless bureaucrats, people they're getting early parole or whatever else is happening, and they're back in the community too fast. And you talk to the men and women in uniform, and they'll tell you it's disheartening to them and to their loved ones when they're working hard. They're putting it on the line. They're putting it on the line with the hope that they're able to protect us from some individuals and their conduct. The person maybe gets prosecuted, goes away for a time, and they're back too quick. They're back faster than the court said that they were going to be back, and they're back too fast, and the public's not protected. That's disheartening. That's disheartening for the men and women in uniform, for their spouses or their sisters and brothers, their loved ones, their neighbors, the people who care about them, their community. Be worthy. We need to be worthy of the risks that they take, of the sacrifices that they make. We have to be able to do our part, and that's my pledge. We pushed some legislative agenda items in this last go-around. I don't need to talk about it here again now, but I told people at that time, I'm making people famous when they voted against us on some of those things, because they must be proud of their vote, right? They're voting against measures that we put in place to protect law enforcement from assault, protect law enforcement from those who resist arrest, protect our communities from people who are fleeing. Our legislation required that they would have mandatory sentences tacked onto the end of their other sentences for assaulting the cop, resisting arrest, or fleeing and endangering the cops, the law enforcement in our community. That's not the law today because it didn't pass. So some people worked hard against us in that regard. And I'm telling everybody, why wouldn't I? They must be proud of what they did. I am I'm never going to relent on these issues. I failed this time. In this session, to get that bill through. It's not going to happen next time.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
That was Drew Wrigley and Scott Hennon a few minutes ago after the press conference, and you have to love the passion of people who are there for a purpose and a reason, and they are going to go down swinging, and that is Drew Wrigley, and you can hear that in his voice. I think it's maybe important to say, to just comment that, to our knowledge, this gentleman, a gentleman's not the right word, Mohammed Barakat had not been in prison. It's not about recidivism. I think Drew Wrigley's just talking about an overall attitude of how do we protect law enforcement, how do we protect the community. And I think there's some conversations, Tom, that we are going to want to have over time. And unfortunately, as callers have pointed out, there are people that are making political points right now. And I just don't think this is the right time. You can have your conversations you want to have about guns and immigration and whatever. We're not doing that here now. This is about a community. One officer lost his life, 2 others that are in critical condition. There will be plenty of time for all of that. But let's get through this before we decide to start making political points and trying to win arguments.
I think you make really good points, Steve, as usual. And one theme that the Attorney General just mentioned, which he mentioned, I believe, earlier on Wednesday as well, is that we have to be worthy. He has repeated that phrase. We have to be worthy as a community to be worthy of the type of professionalism and service that we get from our first responders, including our police department. And we have to be worthy in terms of cooperating with our law enforcement agencies and supporting them and doing what we can to make their job easier. You know, with regard to answers with this particular problem, you know, we heard today from the Attorney General and from our U.S. Attorney that they don't have any idea in terms of a clear motive. And until we can determine the why of this, we can't go about addressing the problem.
Well said. We're coming up. It's 1:57. We're coming up on top of the hour. Here's what we're going to do. On WDAY Radio, the Jay Thomas Show will be beginning here at 2 o'clock after top of the hour news break. And so we're going to discontinue our simulcast coverage. And Jason Berg, Ronnie Lee will be here, and Jason filling in for Jay today. The two of them will continue this conversation. If you'd like to call and continue expressing your questions and your thoughts, you can certainly do that. For listeners on the flag, we're going to return you to normal program in the beginning of the Jimmy Fallon program at 2 o'clock. Tom and I are here for about another 2 minutes or so. Want to let you know a couple of things. We are going to be carrying both of the memorial services for Jake Wallin, the one tomorrow at 10:30. That is going to be taking place in Pequot Lakes. We will be bringing that to you live on both WDAY and the flag. And then Wednesday at 1 o'clock, the public ceremony for this community at Shields Arena. We will bring that to you live as well. So we will be bringing you both of those funeral and ceremony services that are going to be taking place over the next few days. So that being said, we've got time for about maybe one more. You know what? It's just going to be too tight to pull this off in another minute here. So callers, John, thank you for holding on. Again, after top of the hour break, you can call in and kind of or hang on and continue the conversation on the other side of the break. Tom, just 15 seconds or so, your biggest takeaway from today.
Frustration at that we don't have any idea what the motive is here. And the other last point I want to make, again, is just continued prayers and support for those officers still hospitalized, for the private citizen who was injured, and prayers and ongoing support for our law enforcement community and
Absolutely.
our first responders as well.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't add much more to that. Frustrated that we don't know more, but it's not frustration with anybody or law enforcement. It's just you wish you knew what in the world goes through somebody's mind, and is there more behind it than just a lone wolf? We don't know, and we may never know. But investigators and law enforcement will continue to be looking into those things. Thank you for being with us, and we're going to close out our coverage here today, and thank you for joining us.
Fargo police officer Jake Woline lost his life in the line of duty. His end of watch was Friday, July 14th, 2023. You can pick these stickers up at our studios. We're at 2852 Thunder Road South in Fargo between 8 and 4:30 Monday through Friday. It's just a free will donation, whatever you can give. If you can't, we completely understand. All the money will go to Jake Woline's family. The stickers are in. These are stickers to honor fallen Fargo police officer Jake Woline. Lost his life in the line of duty. His end of watch was Friday, July 14th, 2023. You can pick these stickers up at our studios. We're at 2852 Thunder Road South in Fargo between 8 and 4:30 Monday through Friday. It's just a free will donation, whatever you can give. If you can't, we completely understand. All the money will go to Jake Woline's family.